It's live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning producing today's show. You out there. You know, there are times when people will come up to me and say, man, you never give this team enough crap. You're not hard enough on this team. And they're right. On Tuesday night in February, I don't really care. I don't think that anything happened on Tuesday night in February is an indicator of what we saw last night. I don't think there's any parallels from any loss this season that you could say, see, they did it in January, and that's what happened last night. Each night, it's its own individual season almost. And last night was maybe one of the most unacceptable losses that this team has had during the Embiid-Simmons era. And I said yesterday, they need to take care of business. They need to make this 3-1. They need to close this thing out. It doesn't mean that they can't and won't win the series, but it shows that this team just might not be ready. And that's the concern. It's not, hey, they didn't play well on Friday night in March, or they didn't play well on Tuesday night in February. They did not play well last night, and that's a concern. And that's why they lost. There are so many things that happened in that game last night that, look, they didn't have their best game. They didn't have, the best version of Joel Embiid. That was obvious. It's concerning, and it was obvious. They didn't have the best version of Joel Embiid last night, and it cost them. I mean, he goes 0 for 12 from the field in the second half. If he makes one freaking basket, if he goes 1 for 12, they probably win that game. But he went 0 for 12. And the problem became that they didn't have someone else noticing Joel doesn't have it right now, and I have to do it. That goes to Ben Simmons in the second half, was horrible last night. Because that's the moment where Ben Simmons, look, he doesn't want to score, that's fine. He doesn't want to be that guy, that's fine. But when your guy doesn't have it, that's when he needs to say, all right, my guy doesn't have it, I got to help out. I thought Tobias Harris came up small in the second half. He had a good game overall, efficient game overall, but when the team needed that secondary score to step up in the second half of that game and say, guys, Joel doesn't have it tonight, lean on me, it didn't happen. And I said yesterday, and I feel this, and Ben Simmons said something last night, and I think this is a problem. And I said it yesterday, and people, oh, you don't need Danny Green. I think not having Danny Green last night was a problem in multiple aspects. Do they miss Danny Green's offense? Yeah, maybe not. He hasn't been shooting the ball well. But you know what he does? He knows where to space on the floor. He knows how to get out of the way. He knows how to let the other guys do their thing. And every once in a while, he'll hit the big shot. Yeah, he wasn't shooting well, but not shooting well isn't the story. Yeah, you want him to hit those threes. You want him to shoot the ball better. But you know what he does? He makes things better for others because the defenders believe that Danny Green hits 40% of his threes, so I have to go out on him. Even if he doesn't make it, I've got to pay attention to him. And that gets lost in the sauce sometimes. Oh, he's not shooting well. The other team doesn't care that he's not shooting well. He hits 40% of his threes, they're still going to have to pay attention to him. And Ben Simmons said it last night. You could tell that he was frustrated after the game because there wasn't enough spacing on the floor. He says, quote, yeah, I definitely should have been more aggressive and attacked more. I think the spacing was a little off this game. We didn't get our spacing, and we weren't as aggressive in that second half. They didn't have the spacing because they were missing their floor spacer. They had one floor spacer, and yes, Korkmaz is a guy that shoots threes, but he's not the same type of floor spacer that Danny Green is. Korkmaz is coming off screens. He's coming around. He's very movable, moves a lot without the ball in his hand. Danny Green kind of stands in the corner, and he knows how to kind of just keep coming with the play. He just kind of moves back and forth. It's almost like he's got a little track. You know that hockey game in the bubble where the guys can only go up and back as far as the slider will take them. That's kind of like Danny Green. Where the ball moves, Danny comes with it. When the ball moves the opposite way, he goes back to as far deep in the corner as you can go. He's a smart guy. Did they lose the game last night because they didn't have Danny Green? No. But I think it's definitely something to consider as these playoffs continue to move on. Who's the guy when the Atlanta Hawks were starting to make a comeback? Who was the guy in that huddle last night that said, as Doc Rivers pointed out, losing Danny Green, he says the right thing at the right time all the time. Well, when things were going awry last night, who was the guy who stepped up in the huddle and said the right thing at the right time? I don't think he existed. So all the people out there who said, I don't need Danny Green, get him out of the lineup. Fine, you want to take him out of the lineup because he wasn't shooting the ball well. Well, now you saw a little bit of how different it was without him out there. And forget, just having him on that bench, I think, is definitely something this team missed last night, as that game just kind of felt like it was getting away from them. But you know what? Shake Milton came up and hit a big shot. It seemed like the Hawks, every time they kept getting close, somebody made a shot. And you're like, maybe they're going to hold them off, even without Embiid playing his best. I mean, that was clear and that was evident. Embiid just didn't have it last night. Embiid just did not have it last night. I mean, there was times when they played better without Embiid on the floor. And there were, hey, she did just keep him off the floor. He just didn't have it. We left the court, went back behind in the locker room. He ended up coming back out, and then he looked okay. He hit that little spinning baseline jumper fadeaway, and you felt like, all right, maybe he's got some treatment back there, and he felt a little bit better. He obviously did not have the jump last night. That last possession with 16 seconds left in the game, Embiid typically throws that thing right down in your face. And he came up short on the layup last night. And I don't know, did he just not have it in his legs last night? Was he tired? Was he? Who knows? It was game 3. It was game 4 of the Sixers-Raptors series. The Sixers were up 2-1, and Joel Embiid had gastroenteritis and did not play well. And that series could have been 3-1. It ends up being 2-2, and the rest we know is now history. Could we be seeing the same situation where you're up 2-1, you had a chance to win that game last night, as Doc Rivers, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid all acknowledged last night? They had a golden opportunity, and they blew it. Doc Rivers, he didn't mince any words. He said the team effing got outworked last night. The entire second half of that game, it looked like guys in quicksand. I thought Trae Young last night was excellent, even though he did not shoot the ball well. But as I said, look, let Trae Young be the guy to try to beat you. He's not a good shooter. He's a streaky shooter. But if he's not shooting the ball well, let him shoot it. And he wasn't shooting the ball well. Here's the difference. He acknowledged he wasn't shooting the ball well. And while he still shot the basketball, I think he ended up, my God, he shot the ball last night? Trae Young was 8 of 26. He still scored 25 points. But the 18 assists last night, they pick and rolled the Sixers to death last night. They absolutely pick and rolled the Sixers to death last night. Trae Young was masterful at reading the pick and roll. They had Embiid on the skates last night. And again, he was not healthy. He was not himself. That's obvious. And they took advantage of it. They found, we mention on this show a lot to accentuate the positives. When your team has a weakness, don't utilize your weaknesses. Accentuate what you do well. Well, the Hawks found the weakness last night, and they went after it. Joel Embiid was not the same player. They pick and roll him to death. And the result, Trae Young had 25 points and 18 assists. My buddy last night telling me Trae Young, I said, are you watching this guy? That he's not on the same level as X, Y. I don't care if he's not better than X, Y, or Z. Are you watching what he's doing in this game tonight? 40 points, didn't shoot it well, and somehow controlled the whole game. We talk about Ben Simmons a lot, controlling the tempo, controlling the game. Well, guess what? Trae Young stole it from Ben Simmons last night, and he controlled the tempo, and he controlled the game, and that's why the Hawks won. If we're ranking the reasons why the Sixers lost last night, hey, there's a lot of them. We can start it wherever you want. I think you can have a cage match battle royal for who was the number one seed of why they lost that game last night. Joel Embiid, 4 of 20. I don't care if you're hurt or not. You're playing on one leg throughout this series, and you've been the most dominant player. You can't give me 6 of 20? You can't get, he got to the line 8 times, and he made all 8 free throws, by the way. Give him that. Ben Simmons had almost a triple-double in the first half of the game last night, and then absolutely vanished and disappeared. Unacceptable. In terms of who controlled the tempo of the game, Ben Simmons and the Sixers did it in the first half. Trae Young stole it from them, and he controlled the tempo, and they played the game they wanted to play in the second half. The Sixers with 38 points in the second half. They scored 34 in the second. Didn't get enough, obviously, from Embiid. That's number one. I thought Harris played a great game, efficient, but not, he needed to be Harris. Last night was the game Harris needed to have, not 20, but he needed to have his 30-point game. Every once in a while, Harris will pop out a 30. Well, when Embiid only has 17 and he's struggling, Tobias Harris needs to have the night where he scores 28 or 30. Didn't happen last night. Heck, even Korkmaz shot the ball halfway decent. He was 2 of 5 from 3 for 10 points in 25 minutes. What more am I asking from him? Now, defensively, I thought Korkmaz had a rough night at the office. And this is the problem. Danny Green, yeah, he struggled on Trae Young, but he did a really good job when they moved him off of Young and had him on Bogdanovich. Now you've got Korkmaz running around with Herter. That was a nice move by Nate McMillan, putting Herter in the lineup last night. You also, I thought, as Doc Rivers said last night, you're depending way too much on Curry. You can't sit here and have Curry trying to go one-on-one off the dribble. And look, I like Curry. He's a great role player. He fits well on this team, but he's shooting the long twos mainly because they don't have anybody creating offense. And a lot of that, I would have to say, falls on the hand of not having Danny Green out there, because Green goes deep in that corner, which means he takes a defender deep in the corner with him. And Curry's usually up on the wing, and he takes a defender with him. So you have 2 defenders that really have to stay out on the perimeter because those 2 shooters are kind of standstill shooters. Well, you take one of those standstill shooters off the court, and that defender is not as tied to that corner anymore. And I thought that was evident last night. 609 403 0973. 609 403 0973. Rodney checks in, says Embiid is hurt. There's no hiding it. Danny Green is missed with Furkan getting abused on defense, and Ben Simmons needs to man up. Kickouts to Matisse for 3 under the rim, nowhere in the fourth. Well, Matisse Thybulle, who played 15 minutes last night, he's not the same shooter as Danny Green, so he doesn't get the same defensive attention as Danny Green. If Matisse Thybulle's standing in the same spot on the floor as Danny Green is, the defender is not worried about him. You want to let Matisse Thybulle catch and shoot a 3, have at it, Hoss. So that defender, when Matisse is playing the same position and role as Green, that defender is not nearly as close out on him. And he sags in. And last night he's sagging in, and that's clogging up the space for Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and all of that comes into play. The floor spacing. These are the little things. Forget the box score and the stats of what Danny Green does. And somebody brought this up, I think it was Paul Hudrick, way back early in the year. And he talked about how Danny Green is just a smart player in knowing where to stand on the floor when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. Like, that's a lost art of when you talk about these things, just knowing where to stand on the court when you don't have the ball in your hand. What do I do when I don't have the ball in my hand? Matisse can play this. Let's say Matisse Thybulle literally mirrored Danny Green step for step and played exactly in the same spot on the court at all times where Danny Green is. That's great, but the defender sees Danny Green hitting 40% of his threes. So I got to go closer to Danny Green, which now creates more space. Well, Matisse Thybulle's out there. The defender doesn't care about him as much. He's only shooting 28% from three. So I don't have to put my defender, 2 steps towards the paint instead of 2 steps towards the 3-point line. It's a big difference. It's a massive difference, to be honest with you. So, Rodney, you said a lot of good things in there. Look, Embiid is hurt and there's no hiding it. He said after the game, I will not be 100% until this season is over. And I think, look, you're going to have a day where that knee just doesn't feel right. It does. You're going to have a day where that knee, with the meniscus tear, you could go 10 days and it feels fine. And on that 11th day, it kind of, because basically that meniscus area, it's like a little flap. And the little piece of skin, if you have a small tear, it just kind of hangs there. And it doesn't really hurt, but you can kind of walk and it kind of flaps a little bit back and forth. And if it kind of gets stuck in there, you'll have a day where it just feels like crap the whole damn day. You're like, you're trying to click that knee. And you're trying to get it out of there. And who knows? Maybe he woke up yesterday with one of those days where it just didn't feel right. Could come back on Friday night, be back to, I don't want to say 100%, but, that's why they clean it out. You get a little clean out because that little meniscus kind of flaps back and forth. And sometimes if it flaps in the wrong direction, it kind of gets wedged in between the bone and it kind of can get, it's almost like I would say it's like having food stuck in between your teeth and you need to get, dental floss to get it out of there. That's where you got to kind of click it out and try to get it out of there. Otherwise, for the rest of the day, it's a pain in the ass. And I don't know. I didn't talk to Joel Embiid. I don't know anybody treating him or what, but I would imagine he had one of those days where he woke up and it probably didn't feel as well as it did the other couple days. 609-403-0973. Jeff, Danny Green is really out for 2 weeks. I think Danny Green's out for 2 to 5 weeks. I mean, who has a calf injury right now? Mike Trout has a calf injury. He hasn't played in like a month, and they said he's still out for another month. So, and Danny Green's older than Mike Trout is. I don't think Danny Green's, by the way, Danny Green's not saving the season by any stretch, but he's an important cog. This Sixers team is a sum of all the parts. It's not LeBron James type of situation where you can lose a couple of role players and still be at the top of the chain because you have them. You don't have LeBron James. You have a different type of team. This team was put together almost, I don't want to say perfectly, but it was the 5 guys on the court are the best 5 starters when they play together. They have the best net rating in basketball. You take one of those guys out, and it changes the dynamic. Quite frankly, the starting unit that you played last night hasn't played all that much together. So keep that in mind, too. The Sixers had a really good 5-man rotation, and now you take that out, and you got to start from scratch in the playoffs right now. Hey, here's one guy who's been a big part of this. Take him out and start with somebody different. Oh, and by the way, do it in the playoffs on the road. Tony's watching on YouTube, and Tony says, what up, guys? Tough one last night, but just an observation. Ben's second half was a disgrace. Too many games where he is not aggressive. He has good games, and it has nothing to do with points. I can agree with that. He has good games, and it has nothing to do with points. I'm not asking Ben Simmons to score 20, 25 points. But here's the problem, Ben Simmons last night. He did not aggressively take the ball to the basket to set up good looks. And that's where I have the problem. He did in the first half. I thought he did a good job in the first half when they built that lead. But in the second half, for whatever reason, that kind of went away. Simmons had 9 assists last night, but a lot of them, I want to say Ben Simmons almost had 8 or 9 of those assists, 7, 8 of those assists in the first half. Oh, I agree. Look, when Simmons deserves the criticism, he gets it, and he deserved it last night. No questions asked. He deserved the criticism last night. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. We are just getting started on a Tuesday. I hope you are a part of the show at 609-403-0973 on the text board, 609-403-0973. If you want to jump in on the phones, I'll open up the phone lines for anybody who wants to do that. 609-573-3776, 609-573-3776 is the number. And, of course, if you're watching the show live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, you can be a part of the video stream. Leave your comments in the comment section. All right, we are just getting kicked off here. It's a busy day. Frank Close, the Phillies out west last night while you were sleeping. There's an interesting story with that game last night. Michael Kasky-Blomain inside the Sixers. Coach Jimmy Lynam tonight at 5 o'clock. What was the big adjustment in that game last night? Was there an adjustment in that game? Or did the Sixers just not play well? Did they simply just not play well? Your reaction coming up. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. 227 Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app over on the Tech Sports 609 403 0973. Mike, I'm so disappointed that Harris and Simmons were not aggressive in the second half when the big man was obviously hurting. Simmons not driving, hanging out at the perimeter, and Harris only 15 shots. Really, two max contract followers, not leaders. Disappointment warranted. Both of those guys needed to do more in the second half. No problem with that. I think Harris, he's your number 2 scorer, has to give you more. Has to. 15 shots on a night where Embiid just didn't have it. That's where Harris is the number 2 scorer. Look, he led the team in scoring last night. 8 of 15. He was efficient. He was having a good game. 2 of 3 from 3. But for whatever reason, he's got to step in there and say, hey, look, big guy doesn't have it, guys. Even the last shot of the game, it ends up going to Embiid on the drive. And then the last shot after that, you have Shake Milton bringing it up. He's got an opportunity. He passes off to Curry, and Curry's the one that takes the last shot. How about my guy, Tobias Harris, doing something on that last possession? I have no problem putting Ben Simmons at that list today. He needs to be right up there. Look, every day is a different day. He didn't have it last night. In the second half anyway. Simmons played a decent first half. He almost had a triple-double, but not good enough. Not good enough. These are the nights where I say, look, I don't mind if you don't score. I don't mind that you don't score a lot of points. But if somebody else is not playing to their capabilities or their average, that's when yours has to go up. And you have Joel Embiid, who's typically getting 30 points a game. He only scored 17 last night. So he didn't have it. Harris scored 20, which he normally does. I would have liked. So Harris and Simmons, I think you can say, you can compartmentalize as those two guys collectively needed to give you more. I mean, because Curry scores 17. I can't sit here and bitch about him. He had 7 of 10, 3 of 6. He had 17 points. I can't sit here and say Curry didn't give me enough. That would be asinine. Korkmaz scores 10. He hits 2 threes. I can't sit here and say, Korkmaz, I need more offense out of you. He gives you what Danny Green typically would give you in terms of points. The point guys, it's Simmons and Harris. Need it more. There's no possible way that either one of those two should be looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, man, I gave it all I had last night. And I'm not questioning their effort. I'm not saying they just half-assed it. But for whatever reason, they didn't want to be there in the big moment. And that's concerning. Especially for Tobias Harris, who, let's be honest, he is the guy that is the secondary scorer on this team behind Embiid. So if Harris doesn't have it, you then need somebody else. Because the shooters, part of the reason why the shooters contribute what they do is because of Ben Simmons. So some of Curry's game is because Simmons takes so much attention and gives him open shots. The problem is last night when Harris doesn't have it and he's not aggressively being a big part of it, Ben Simmons, where you at? So, and keep this in mind. When you play Furkan Korkmaz in the game, and I mentioned it before, they pick and rolled the Sixers to death. They went right after Korkmaz. He is a poor defender. And you have to consider now, do I start Korkmaz? Because you can come out of the gates and game plan for Korkmaz and get some easy buckets right off the bat because Korkmaz in the game. Mike, on the text board, 609-403-0973. Mike, I really like Simmons and Harris, but they need to step up. With everything that happened last night, the game was still winnable. No question. You're on the road. And I said this yesterday, Atlanta's going to throw one more big haymaker at you. And they only shot 30% from 3. They only hit 12 threes. And I mentioned before, for them to beat you, they need to hit 20. Well, last night they got 12, and they shot under their average. That tells you how bad the Sixers played in that game last night. Because realistically, they won that game not because they efficiently scored. They won that game because they kicked your ass in the hustle department. And that's a punch to the gut. They beat you in the hustle department. John Collins hasn't done anything in this series. He out-hustled you. Slam dunks left and right, gets the crowd going. He had the momentum of that place changed really quickly. Bogdanovich didn't shoot it well, 4 of 13, had a couple of big shots. Herter didn't shoot the ball all that well last night. They put him in the starting lineup, and it really didn't do much for them. Gallinari hit a big three. I mean, you look up and down, they only scored 103 points. But Trae Young, I got to say, I have not – when he entered the league, I did not think Trae Young was going to be a franchise type of player. And I don't know that the Hawks will ever win a championship because Trae Young's the best player on the best team, but he has exceeded my expectations of what I thought he would be. And you know why? Because even when he doesn't have an efficient night scoring the ball or shooting the ball, he's still a factor. He shot 3 of 11 from three-point range last night. Are you kidding me? If you had a guy shooting 3 of 11, you'd be like, stop shooting. But that's what makes Young special, is that he keeps shooting. But because he keeps shooting, it makes you're on ice skates defending him. And he has no problem passing it off. He had 18 assists last night. Trae Young's a player, man. There's no question. It's not like an obvious – I mean, I'm making an obvious statement there, but he is way better than I thought he would be at this level. That's for sure. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. More on this game because Jimmy Lynam, the coach, is going to join me at 5 o'clock tonight. You need to hear that. Brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan, the all-new Matt Blatt, open, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. Online, mattblattnissan.com. Coming up, the Phillies out west last night. While you were sleeping, they had a lead in that game. Their pitcher was throwing well, and then, well, you probably can figure out the rest. What do the Phillies do with Spencer Howard? Well, we have the mailbag coming up next with Frank Close as we answer your Phillies questions. Do you have a Phillies question for Frank? Text it in now, 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. All right, Sports Best Live on a Tuesday. Tough loss for the Sixers last night. We'll continue to break it down. MKB 320 today. But right now, the Phillies were out west after a sweep of the Yankees over the weekend. They took on the Dodgers last night, had a lead early in that game. Spencer Howard got off to a good start, and then putt, ran out of gas, as usual. Is that something that we can pencil in every time he starts now, Frank? Is this the Spencer Howard thing? He gives you 3-4 innings, and that's all we should be expecting from your top pitching prospect?
Yeah, they need more than that. I think that's pretty clear. The Phillies absolutely, if you're going to be in the starting rotation, if you're going to be taking up that spot on the roster as a starting pitcher, you need to go more than 3+ and start flaming out. Because really, last night he started really running out of gas kind of in the fourth inning, got through it, came out for the fifth, home run, bye.
Yep, threw 67 pitches last night, and that was all he had, really. I mean, you looked at it, he was kind of out of gas. He was putting along in the fourth in that game last night. He ends up giving up just 2 hits. He had 4 strikeouts, but he gives up 3 runs and 2 homers. So I guess you got to, ask yourself, is the right move to continue pitching him in the starting rotation?
Well, that's something they got to figure out. So last night, it was very, very clear that they kind of knew his limitations, which is why they called up Bailey Falter. And Falter, by the way, did a tremendous job at giving them 3 innings out of the bullpen. That was sort of the role that Ranger Suarez used to have before he sort of promoted himself out of it. But you can't take up 2 spots on the roster for every single start. At some point, that's going to catch up with the Phillies. Right now, it kind of is working okay because the Phillies are having so many days off, right? So they're in the stretch. They're off again on Thursday, then they're off again on Monday, then they're off again the next Thursday. So you can kind of get away with that right now when you don't have a whole lot of games at once because your bullpen won't be overtaxed. But sustainably for the rest of the season, there's something that they got to do about that because it's just not going to work.
Nope, it won't. And Joe Vaughn wants to know in the mailbag, how do you think the Phillies address Howard's spot in the rotation? Do they go back to the minors to find someone? Do they have to acquire someone in a trade? If you're Dave Dombrowski, do they think they can stretch him out like as this goes on? Or, is this what he is right now?
So I think that's going to be determined by how he does this month and into next month. Maybe around the All-Star break, as you get closer to the trade deadline, you start trying to figure this out a little bit. Again, not sustainable 2 people for 1 rotation spot. So the Phillies are going to have to do something. The rested bullpen, they can hang out on this for a little while. But if you look down at the end of the month, the Phillies have a doubleheader against the Mets, and then they play every other day until the All-Star break in July. So that stretch is going to be critical that they get some innings out of their starting pitchers because your bullpen will just be way too exhausted. So they're going to have to make a decision. Howard, I guess long-term, if this is not something he can do, then you start asking the question of, did you try to make him a valuable reliever? Because let's face it, first few innings each time out, he's looking pretty good. Mm-hmm. And he just doesn't have the stamina. But then you got to ask the question: will he have the stamina to come back night after night out of the bullpen?
Why doesn't he have the stamina? Why is he a grown man, top level pitcher, and he doesn't have the ability to go past 4 innings? Why is that?
That I can't tell you. Is something wrong? I mean, hopefully nothing is wrong. It's or hey, let's face it, he hasn't pitched a lot the last couple of years, right? He's never pitched more than like 170 innings in any. I think that maybe not even that, but since he's been in the organization, he has not pitched a full minor league season, and that really has perhaps kind of set him back. Is it something he can grow out of? Maybe, but the fact, I'll just kind of say this: did they baby him too much? All worried about protecting his precious arm. Did they make him unable to throw? I remember back in the day, Cliff Lee used to say the key to longevity is to throw more. Well, if you're Spencer Howard and they're limiting every little inning because they're afraid that you're going to hit some sort of magic number and flame out, well, maybe he's never really built up the arm strength to go for a season.
Frank Close, our Phillies mailbag. All right, let's take a look at something else. Oh, by the way, Bailey Falter, who is he? Is he a guy that is in? I mean, where did he come from? What's his role? What does he project as?
So Bailey Falter, he was from the system. He is Phillies draft pick. You didn't really hear much about him over the last couple of years, of course, because there was no minor league season last year. So at AAA Lehigh Valley, he really did impress when he was down there in the minor leagues. If you look at his numbers at AAA, he was 2-0 with a 1.82 ERA. He started 6 games for the Iron Pigs, and then the 7th appearance came out of the bullpen because it seemed like the Phillies were primed to call him up for a role like that. But yeah, he's somebody who pitched pretty well in 2019 at AA. Again, he's kind of one of those wild cards, like we talked before about Nick Maton and Luke Williams. You didn't see their 2020, so you don't totally know what you get. But right now, he's looking pretty good at AAA. He's somebody I can see maybe the Phillies move him up and down because he's certainly got the minor league options depending on how the roster is constructed. And maybe he's somebody who could start for them down the line. Who knows? But they don't seem to be going that route just yet. It looks like they want him to be a lefty out of the pen that can give him a few innings. At least for now, he came up as the piggyback to Spencer Howard. But we'll see where it goes. I mean, let's face it. If you have success on the mound, you're going to stick around, right? Like Ranger Suarez, we just mentioned, right? He finally battled back after injuries and all kinds of other issues. He's pitching himself into a permanent spot in the bullpen, so he'll have that opportunity as well.
All right, let's ask this question. And I don't know why anybody would want to know this. Andrew, this scares me. What's the future for Matt Moore, David Hale, and Chase Anderson? Those were the 2 veteran guys they brought in to kind of be a part of the back end. Neither one of them is really helping out much. Dave Hale, we know they traded for him last year, and he has really been a disappointment.
Yeah, well, I think Andrew is asking because he kind of sees those 3 as sort of a burden on the roster. And let's face it, without the 3 of them pitching lately, the Phillies have done okay. David Hale of the 3, I think he's probably the weakest link of the 3. When you look at somebody who's making the least amount of money, somebody who is perhaps the most expendable of the 3, I can see that the clock is ticking on some of these guys, especially as the Bailey Falters and the Ranger Suarez's come up and basically stake their claim to a spot in the Phillies bullpen. So I think David Hale, if anybody, is going to be the one who kind of loses his job. I mean, he's been scored upon on 8 of his 14 outings. And there are a couple other times, big spots, like you think to that Chase Anderson start in Dunedin with all the misplays in the outfield. And, David Hale comes in and all of a sudden gives up 2 of the inherited runners he faced. So I think he's kind of on the short leash. The bullpen's getting kind of crowded as these other arms emerge. And at some point, they're going to make a decision. Hale, I think if you remove him from your 40-man roster, you can create an opportunity for somebody else. So I think he's the first one to go. Anderson and Moore, I think they're going to stick around a while. They're making more money. I mean, that does factor into it, let's be honest. But it looks like Matt Moore in his rehab starts at AAA. It looks like the Phillies are stretching him out to be a starter. Now, does that mean he sticks around in the rotation to maybe replace Spencer Howard like we were just saying? Or that with that stretch coming up, the Phillies need an extra starter when they start getting into the double headers. So maybe Matt Moore comes up to start a little bit. They need somebody, right? And then if you're down another starter somehow, you're going to need you might need Chase Anderson to make some starts too. So they got to find a way to juggle those guys. Right now, we don't know where Chase Anderson is at. He's on the COVID injured list. We have no information as to the nature of that. He went on and then he immediately came off and then went right back onto the COVID list. So hopefully nothing major is wrong there. But it just seems like every time it looks like you're in a roster crunch, somebody gets hurt or something happens. So they've happened to have the roster spot. But eventually that's not going to happen. But I think of those 3, David Hale is the one that's most likely to go.
All right. The closing spot. A lot of conversation about this after Neris coughed up another one.
And nobody asked me a question. I thought for sure I would get a closer question.
Well, you kind of did. I mean, Neftali Feliz is a closer. He once was. He's been killing it down at AAA. I mean, because the closer up here has been so bad. I don't want to say so bad. I don't think that's fair. But it's like Groundhog's Day. He pitches well, but I don't think you can trust him in the biggest of big moments. But I don't know. Isn't that the closer in baseball today? Which closers do you trust? 2?
Right. So I actually looked it up because immediately nobody comes to mind right now as sort of the dominant lockdown closer in Major League Baseball, right? I mean, the names of the past that are still around, I guess Aroldis Chapman's been decent, having some decent numbers. He's got 12 saves, 2 blown saves. Mark Melancon, the guy that just never seems to go away. Mark Melancon has 19 saves and a .64 ERA. Craig Kimbrell, somebody who was the Cubs almost seemed ready to give up on last year. He's got 18 saves and a 0.66 ERA. And then out of nowhere, Alex Reyes for the Cardinals. He's 17 saves, 0.84 ERA. So of course, Josh Hader is probably a name that's been around. But other than Josh Hader, nobody's really at that lockdown level like we've seen before. I mean, Kenley Jansen's still around, but he's not infallible anymore. It feels like the era of the lockdown closer is just not with us anymore. So then the question becomes: Is Neris okay? I mean, he's got 4 blown saves so far, 3.16 ERA. He's been okay. I don't think he's been totally horrible. Now, in the course of a season, even back in the day, the Billy Wagner types, they might blow 7 in a season. So you're not halfway done the season yet per se, but he could end up about right. I mean, you have a bad week in your closer like Neris if you blow a couple saves and it feels like the world is collapsing around you. But let's face it. I mean, over the course of the season, there's going to be about 7-ish.
Right.
And they could probably handle 8. And the Phillies have won some of his blown saves at least, right? So, it's not the end of the world. It's good that Archie Bradley is back and looking better, but I really don't think it's the end of the world in terms of that. Now, I was personally advocating that they claim Brad Hand this offseason. He's been doing okay for the Nationals, 2 blown saves and 12 saves, but I think this is something they're just gonna have to roll with. I don't think it's as bad as I think a lot of people are making it out to be, but there's definitely room for improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I hear people all the time yelling and screaming about Neris. They just don't have another option. And, 1.13 whip. I mean, look, he's going to blow saves. I get it. It's frustrating. And part of it's because he's blown saves in the past, I think, that carries over. If this was just him this year, you'd be, okay, he's blowing a save. That happens. But because he's had so many failures in the past, I think that kind of predetermines that we don't want him, but they don't have another option.
Yeah, and let's remember he was very, very good in 2019. Last year, kind of so-so, but I'm willing to throw out last year on almost everybody because it was such a small sample size and such a strange year. But yeah, truth be told, he is still rather reliable. Not the end of the world. Could he be better? Yes, but if you take him out of the closer's role, he's going to have to pitch in your 7th inning, and that's just as important an inning anyway.
All right. So tell us about Phillies.
So Neftali Feliz. All right. So former closer in Major League Baseball. He's actually had a pretty remarkable start in AAA. When the Phillies signed him as a non-roster invitee to spring training, veteran guy. We've seen a number of them come through over the years, but Feliz had not pitched in the majors in a couple seasons. So he didn't really pitch much in the Grapefruit League. He only made 3 appearances at the back end and really did not get a chance to claim a spot on the Phillies roster. But the roster issues are going to be what matters for him. I mean, I haven't personally got to see him pitch down at AAA. I don't know how he looks, but the numbers look good in his first 12 appearances. He's got a 1.59 ERA and 4 saves down there and a 2-1 record. So he's looking pretty good, but those 40-man roster spots, like I just said, I've been saying over and over again, they're kind of at a point where they're pretty valuable right now. So it would probably take somebody like David Hale getting released or an unfortunate injury that's long-term for somebody that lands him on the 60-day IL for you to really find some space for somebody like him. It's kind of rolling the dice.
Possible that the Phillies have 40 guys in their organization that they deem unmovable. This team's averages can be. I mean, I don't get it.
That's a good point, but
40-man, get him off.
I think the problem just is with some of the prospects, you don't necessarily want to give up on them. And, the Phillies were very, very thin at the position player side of things. And most of their 40-man roster has been on pitchers. A lot of those pitchers aren't ready to come up yet. You're not going to cut someone like Adonis Medina or Mauricio Llovera. Some of these younger Francisco Morales, right? Christopher Sanchez is somebody who came up for a cup of coffee. Arms like that, you don't want to necessarily lose them unless you absolutely have to. And so I think you want to hang on to as much pitching as possible. And I get that, but it's going to take something else opening up, like a David Hale release for them to even consider something like that. But they might, the Phillies are still kind of walking a tightrope for position players. If they acquire somebody who's on the position player side, they got to find a place for him too. So I think the roster crunch will define that. And the other thing too is they have guys like Enyel De Los Santos they can bring up and down. If you bring Feliz up to the major league roster, then you don't have the option to send him right back down. So because of his veteran status. So I think I wouldn't rule out calling him up. Maybe you'll get a little bit more of a sample size,
Yeah.
but so far so good.
Well, I got Chase Anderson, Brandon Kintzler, Matt Moore that don't need a roster spot. I don't mind Mickey Moniak. I don't need him on my 40-man any longer. I guarantee you no one's picking him up either. So have fun with
Somebody
that
would.
debate. And guess what? If they want him, they can have him.
Yeah, I think somebody would claim Moniak as the first overall pick status is going to make him hang around no matter what. But you're right. But I don't think those types of guys they're not going to cut the $4 million for Moore, $3 million for Anderson, and they're not going to cut. I mean, David Hale might be it, but I think if you're going to bring somebody like Feliz up, you want to make sure that there's a path that they don't need to go cut him the next week. You always want to retain as much pitching as possible. I think that's true of any organization.
All right, Frank Close, the Phillies mailbag. He'll be back on Tuesday, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Phillies and Dodgers. We didn't get into your thoughts on the whole Peacock thing, but maybe down the road there, Frank. All right, Frank, appreciate it, man.
Have a good one, Mike.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Frank Close covers the Phillies for 97.3 ESPN.com. And coming up, Jeff Nadeau, how do you bet these NBA playoffs and the Euro 2020? He's been red hot giving out winners. So stick around for that coming up next here on the Sports Bash. All right, second hour of the show, Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. Don't forget, coming up at 5 tonight, the coach, Jimmy Lina, will be with me. Also, MKB in about 19 minutes from now. Sixers lose last night, and quite frankly, just a pathetic second-half effort there. Not much more you can sugarcoat. It was a bad effort last night, unacceptable. Obviously, not Embiid's best night out. Simmons, terrible in the second half. Harris, very disappointing. Those were they would be your three culprits in my mind there, Jeff Nadeau, from that game last night. I thought when obviously Embiid was not himself, your second scorer, Tobias Harris, needs to step it up. He did not at that point. That is when Ben Simmons doesn't get the pass of being, hey, let everybody else score. Those two didn't have it. Last night, that goes to him.
But, Mike, the problem that you have is outside of one of those folks, we are having this conversation all the time. I mean, anytime I speak to you, it's Ben Simmons didn't do enough. Tobias Harris didn't do enough. I mean, that's always been the conversation with this group. It's not like and I got a lot of flack for comments that I've made on them, but I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm sick of this fan base. How many excuses are you going to make for these guys? I mean, it's every year, Mike. Do you make the same – not you personally, but this fan base make the same excuse?
Well, I mean, is the question this? Are they just simply not good enough?
I've been saying that for years, Mike. They're not. They're not good enough. They don't match up well enough with the net. If they had, Mike, they'd have won by now. And the process, and this is where we go all the way back to that, it wasn't done correctly. So you sold that bill of goods to this family.
I think I said there's no question about that. You're right about that. They had 4 different general managers of this team. You're not going to you have 4 different opinions on how to put this team together. And this is what you see sometimes. You got a mismatch of 4 different minds trying to put a roster together. You can't do that.
And what you did last year was you created a scapegoat with Brett Brown, which we could agree had to go. But Brett Brown went far too late. He should have been fired 2 years ago. It doesn't make any sense to sell this bill of goods that the process worked and everything's going to be fine, yet we're going to keep Brett Brown around for 4 or 5 years. We're going to, not fully go all in. And then we throw together a team like they've done the last couple of years that isn't good enough. You still don't have a player at the end of games, Mike, that can score the basketball. It's that simple.
How much of that is, I see Doc Rivers. People are getting mad at him now. And I'm the kind of guy who the NBA is not a coach's league. This is a player's league.
Right.
We blame the coach way too much in the NBA. Like Ty Lue, I don't know. Is he a good coach? Is he a bad coach? I don't know. He always seems to have the best player on his team. That helps. You put him on a team that's not very good, he got himself fired. You know why? Because it doesn't really matter all that much. Now people want to blame Doc Rivers. Now it's Doc Rivers' fault. Well, it was Brett Brown's fault. We got to stop blaming the coach and just wonder, hey, is this team, you just said it, they don't have a closer. So Brett Brown, you give him a closer, I'm sure Brett Brown probably wins. You don't give him a closer, they don't win.
Yeah, and it's a combination. I think, though, you're totally right. I mean, it's partly the coach, but it's way more the team. And at this point, it is this team. This is 2 different regimes now where you had the opportunity last night to take a commanding position, and you did it in the first half. But yet again, the defensive problems creep up. You don't have, and it always seems to the Sixers for games on end are never on the same page, where they can't play really good defensively and really good offensively for games on end. And if anyone in this fan base wants to disagree with what I'm saying, provide factual basis that I'm not saying anything untrue. Everything I'm saying has come to fruition. They are not good enough. And it's one of the reasons I picked against them in this series.
Here's the thing, and I agree with you in terms of this team was a 6 seed last year with the arrow pointing down clearly. For them to be the 1 seed this year and have championship aspirations, they made a pretty remarkable flip from arrow pointing down with a mess of a roster. You know what I'm saying? Like Morey came in and fixed this thing to where I don't think anybody thought this was going to be the number 1 seed in the East, right?
But Mike, here's the problem, okay? And I think you did say something that I agree with. They are the number 1 seed, fine. But outside of Brooklyn, has there been one team in the East that over like this entire season. Miami's down. Boston's down. Atlanta's kind of come into to the picture. The Knicks made the playoffs. I'm not making excuses. They made it. You're right. But, Mike, at the end of the day, you and I both know the only thing that matters is, does this team make the NBA Finals? And can they go and win a title? I am not in a belief that in a 6-7 game series they can do that. And let's be frank, why would you think they can do that? The only people that think they can do that are people that are, disillusioned because they're a fan of this team. And that's fine. You want to be, root for them, but you've got to have some realness to what you're doing. And that's this fan base has completely lost any sort of realism that they used to have. I'm not saying be negative all the time, but this fan base has become totally deluded.
Well, the problem I feel with this fan base, Jeff, is the process split the fan base. You have anti-processors. You have the people who support it. They both hold on to both their sides. And the unrealistic, irrational nature that came from it made it like an Eagles game on February 8th on Tuesday night. People react to it. That shows you that that's what the process was for. There was apathy towards this organization. Nobody gave two you-know-whats. And now they almost care irrationally too much. Because they won 10 games one year, people demand that they win the championship the first season that those two guys were healthy and ready to play, they got to win the title because they lost 72 games. That's not how it works. Joel Embiid's in his 7th year. That's Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Those guys don't win until their 7th, 8th, 9th years in the league. They don't just come onto a team and win. But because of the way the Sixers got those guys, the fans demand that they win immediately.
But it sucks because, we both were competent basketball fans when Allen Iverson was here. And I always thought when I was younger, the cautionary tale of this city was the fact that they never gave the stars in this town the proper team around them. Whether it was Allen Iverson, Donovan McNabb, all these guys. They all were great, and they all never got it done because they didn't necessarily have the group around them. And it seems like they're doing the same thing with Joel Embiid. Why not go out and make, the move and bring a James Harden here, or go out and make the move that, separates. Because again, Mike, and I think you'll agree because I say it anytime I come on here. Why do people think Ben Simmons is just going to rapidly become this generation? Mike, I said it last week and I'll say it again. He is Andre Iguodala. That's what he is. That's what he's going to be. You can make the case Iguodala was a better player than he was because he could shoot the ball. This guy does not want to get better. He does not want to improve. And to have a game in 35 minutes in the playoffs where you contribute 4 points to the game is pitiful and it's disgraceful.
Hey, look, the team, sadly, Jeff, I think has acquiesced to that. They have decided I can't score, so we're not going to ask you to score.
And that's my issue with Doc Rivers, Mike, is the acceptance of we're just going to be okay with what Ben wants to do.
Right. Well, where Brett Brown almost was begging to the media to try to get more, but Brett Brown couldn't get more out of him. Well, here's the same problem with this coach. This coach has now said, you know what? You're not a scorer. We're not going to ask you to score. We've built a team around you that we don't need you to score. Brett Brown needed Ben Simmons to score.
Yeah, it's just they just don't have that, And look, I love Seth Curry. I think he's had a great year, and Harris has had his stretches, and Joel's had his stretches, and obviously been a great MVP caliber type of player. But at the end of the day, you need a guard like a Donovan Mitchell or a Devin Booker or a guy like that can go and get you a bucket, and they just don't have that. And for whatever reason, they had it with Jimmy Butler, and they allowed him to walk. They couldn't bring it in this year with a Kyle Lowry or something. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. It's tiring.
All right. Let's take a look at this then, the NBA playoffs, because it's got interesting.
Yeah.
And tonight you've got James Harden going to give it a go, it looks like. He has gone from doubtful to questionable to pretty much going to play, and that line opened up +3 Nets. It's now +2.5 Nets Bucks as that series is all tied up. It's funny because in Milwaukee, down 2-0, I'm sure they're having frustrating conversations like we are. Now all of a sudden the series is 2-2.
Yeah, they've had it ultimately worse than we have, frankly, and I feel bad for that fan base. But I get 4 in this game. I played it around 11 o'clock Eastern. I got 4. I had some belief that James Harden would play in this game, or at least give you something. I was blown away that even without James Harden and with only Kevin Durant, you were giving the Nets 4 points. This is not a good road team, the Bucks. This group has really struggled all season on the road. Brooklyn, at any rate, has arguably the best player in the world, and I look at them as a home dog, and I'm just probably always going to bet that. It's just kind of where I am with them at this point. I think offensively they've obviously struggled over the last couple of games, but I think there was a lot to say about what the Bucks did or didn't do. I mean, the Bucks have shot 26% from 3 in this series, Mike. They haven't made free throws, but they found a way back into the game because Brooklyn has had all sorts of injury issues. If you get Harden back, you get something from him, Kevin Durant. I think that's enough to make me want to be interested in the Bucks. Again, I got 4. I know it's a 2.5 now. My thought was they won this game. They'd win this game. I think this is going to be an absolute war probably to the end. And something tells me, and it's interesting, that Brooklyn is still, even yesterday, the favorite to win the NBA title. That goes a long way in my thought as to where I think the pecking order is in the NBA still, even without a fully healthy Harden and Kyrie Irving. But the Brooklyn Nets are just a different team with James Harden on it. They're actually, record-wise, extremely good. Their points per game is a lot better. Offensive efficiency is a lot better. I'm on the Nets. I got 4.
Interesting. All right. So Bucks back in Brooklyn tonight. They say Harden's going to try. Unless there's a setback, he will play tonight. We don't know about Kyrie. That series is 2-2. You can hear the game on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow night, Hawks Sixers. The game's back in Philly. Open 6.5. It's now at 6 at DraftKings. 6.5. BetMGM, FanDuel. So it's 6.5, depending on what you like.
Yeah, I mean, this is a series that we've obviously seen, so many things. We obviously saw how good Atlanta shot the ball in game 1, and then the Sixers kind of came back with a great defensive prowess in the second and third game. I've said it, and I'll say it again. The big problem Atlanta has in this series is losing DeAndre Hunter hurt. I know people don't really give him a ton of credit because he's so young, but he's a lockdown defender. I think one thing we've seen about Atlanta outside of last night was defensively, they have just been a mess. And that's one thing I think the Sixers can be proud of. Offensively, they've actually been very good in this series. I don't really know what happened over the final 5 minutes of that game, frankly. I mean, the Sixers, I think, scored 2 points over the final 5 minutes. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you lose by 1 or 100. They lost. 6.5 seems a little rich. It's either the Hawks are going to win or the Sixers are going to win by double digits. A lot of these games, other than last night, haven't been real close, frankly. But Capella, I think, kind of figured something out. It seems that Joel Embiid's kind of tipping his hand a little bit to make the excuse that the team is tired. I saw a lot of fans making that excuse. Are we actually making that excuse? Is that a joke? Was that trolling, Mike, or actually serious?
Whole thing. I mean, Embiid in Game 4 in the Toronto series, they were up 2-1. That's the game he had the gastroenteritis, and we saw how that thing ended up going. They instead of 3-1, it's 2-2, and they have to go 7 games. So you hope that the Game 4s don't mirror each other there.
Mike, I'm nowhere near the level of NBA player, but 7 days a week, doesn't matter when it is, I'm out there working out. I don't make excuses. I'm tired. Yesterday I didn't feel like doing anything, but I went out and did it anyway. When are some of these guys going to man up? I mean, you're tired. Everyone's tired.
The whole league's got a problem, man. This whole everybody sitting out with the load management and all that.
Wasn't there 3 days off between these games as well?
Yeah, 2 games. Yeah, 2. They played Tuesday. They were off Wednesday, Thursday. No, they were off
3 days. 3 days.
They played what? Saturday.
Yeah, and they didn't play till
Friday. No, they played Friday night. They were off Saturday, Sunday.
And then all of Monday, too, as well.
So the rest of the way, it's every other day from here on out, all the way through.
Well, everybody's playing like that, Mike. The Suns hasn't bothered them. Hasn't bothered, Clippers coming back. I mean,
no, and did the Suns, like these teams that do the load management, like the Nets, they've been holding these guys out all year. Well, guess what? You can't just turn it on and ramp it up. You pull a hamstring because you haven't played all year. So the load management teams, they're having some injury. A lot of the stars are having some problems. All right, last one tomorrow night, Clippers Jazz. That series just got interesting. Clippers plus 2.5 against the Jazz on the road.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to be stubborn. I mean, unless Michael Conley comes back for the Utah Jazz, I just don't have much interest in this team. I don't think they're very good without Conley. I know Donovan Mitchell gets all the love, and he's terrific, but you really need the conductor for everything to go. And they just have too many net negatives offensively to replace a guy like Mike Conley, Mike. Royce O'Neal, Gobert, Derek Favors, Joe Ingles. All these guys have limitations, whether it's defensively or they just don't score. You don't get much out of them. Donovan Mitchell has to shoulder a heavy load. He puts 40 up and they still lose. It's Nikola Jokic's problem, and it's his problem as well. They need Conley back, and if he doesn't come back, which I don't think he's going to, they're going to lose this series. Because I will say this about Tyronn Lue. I think he is a good coach, and some of these adjustments in the playoffs have made it clear he knows what he's doing, because there are certain guys that wouldn't have made these adjustments. Nice job by Tyronn Lue.
All right. I know Euro 2020, you've been handing out winners left and right at Jeff Nadeau. What do you like on the I know 2 games are already in action today. Anything on your slate tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, there's a game that just started live. I took a little shot with the draw here. Whole world was on France. This game screams 1-1 to me. A lot of talent on the field. Sometimes that just kind of cancels out. Tomorrow, I was a little surprised that there's some games that I'm looking into. Finland, I thought, was too high of a price. I mean, you're getting almost 5-1 on Finland, and I know that's not going to rustle much with I think the normal fan, but they've got some goal scorers there. They're a tough team to break down. Have a feel to that Iceland team a couple years ago that was a tough out in Euros. Russia is not strong to me. Defensively, they're not very good. I also am very high on Italy. I think this is the best team, arguably outside of France in this tournament. Nobody's given any credit to. I think Italy is a pretty good look tomorrow. Switzerland is struggling. They're not the team they were 2 or 3 years ago. They just have a lot of ragtag guys on one team. I like Italy. They'd be kind of something I'm looking at as well. But I'm liking this tournament. It's nice to have stuff at the middle of the day.
All right. At Jeff Nadeau. Follow that. I think you hit your first 4 in a row on the soccer side of things. So get a soccer pick from him at Jeff Nadeau, the Hoops Betting Hour, and all that good stuff with Jeff Nadeau, the sit down as well. Check it out, my friends.
Thank you, Mike.
Take
Appreciate
care,
you. See you,
all right,
buddy.
Jeff Nadeau, like all guests appeared. Good conversation. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. We do it on Tuesdays with Jeff. But when we come back, we'll go to our Sixers, Inside the Sixers segment with Michael Caskey-Blomain from CBS Sports. He covers the NBA. Plus, we'll talk about this Nets-Bucks game tonight. That's all coming up right here on the Sports Bash. All right, 323 inside the Sixers. Their loss last night. Let's take a look at some of the things that happened. What could change? What's concerning? Michael Kasky-Blomain covers the Sixers and the NBA for CBS Sports, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And Michael, obviously, that game last night had a lot of different problems and storylines and things to kind of break down here. I guess at the top of the list was, is it time to be concerned with what we saw from Joel Embiid, or do you think that was a blip on the radar?
Yeah, Mike, I absolutely think it's time to be concerned. That was, to me, the biggest takeaway in the game. Obviously, the loss was a big disappointment, but how Joel looked throughout the course of that game was, definitely the most concerning thing to me. I think, he definitely deserves props and credit for trying to play through this injury, but it does seem like the type of injury that could potentially get worse with wear and tear. And, I think there has to be a level of concern that that's what we're starting to see. He looked really good in those first two games of the series. He looked, still real solid in game 3, but maybe slightly worse. And then last night was, obviously probably the worst playoff performance of his career. And you could just see he didn't have, not only the shots weren't falling, but he didn't have the bounce that he usually has. He didn't have the explosion. Especially that was obviously evident on the last play down the stretch there where they ran the pick and roll for him to get the layup right at the rim to, give the Sixers a lead at the closing minutes. And he, missed the layup, didn't get fouled. After the game, he said that he normally would try to go up and dunk that and draw a foul, but he just didn't have the lift and the explosion. So, I am concerned. Obviously, Joel at 80% or whatever he's at now is still really good. But, is that good enough to get the Sixers where they want to be? That's the question now.
Yeah, and I guess, is that a one-night thing? Is it, hey, day to day? He said, I'm not going to be 100% until after this season is over. He acknowledged that, but it's how he manages it. And maybe,
Right.
In game 3, 1, 2, and 3, it felt better. Last night, maybe not so much. Could it just be he's going to have some nights where he has it and some nights that he doesn't? Could he come back on Wednesday night and be 39-point Joel Embiid again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the case, Mike. And I remember, I think it was last week when you and I were talking about this injury. It's the type of injury that you're never really in the clear from, for the rest of the season. Even if he's cleared to play, there was the potential that, he could play and the knee could swell up. It could get worse. It could cause him more pain. And I think, like you said, at this point, he's obviously delaying any, if he needs any sort of surgery or anything on it, he's delaying it till the end of the season. And moving forward, it's all just going to be about his level of pain tolerance and how much he can, continue to play through that injury. So I do think it's going to be an up and down situation. Obviously, hopefully tomorrow night he's able to look more like he did during the regular season. But to me, it's going to be a game in, game out situation.
Obviously, after most games, win or lose, Ben Simmons is a conversation. He admitted last night, hey, I should be more aggressive. Well, people say that almost every single night. But last night's the one. Like, to me, I'm not a Ben Simmons hater. I appreciate what he does. I appreciate who he is and his role on this team. But I always say, if Embiid doesn't have it, Harris steps up. If Harris doesn't step up, that's when Ben Simmons needs to step in. You can't ask for more than you got from Curry. He was doing his job. So this is the game where I say, you know what? I don't have a problem pointing the finger at Ben Simmons. The question is really, how do they get that out of him? Like, what can they do on nights when they need him to kind of say, Ben, it's time to change your approach a little bit?
I don't know, Mike. That's, really, a great question. And it's one that they've been dealing with, obviously, for a few years now. In game 3, obviously, it was a pep talk at halftime from Doc Rivers and Joel that basically told him, like, hey, we need you to go out there and dominate and take over. And he did that in the second half of game 3. And I think that's why his performance in the second half last night just took one shot, no shots in the fourth quarter. I thought that was especially kind of discouraging after how well he had played in the second half of game 3. I thought, maybe a light bulb kind of went off in his head in that game that, hey, these guys can't, Bogdanovich can't guard me, John Collins can't guard me. And I thought he would, potentially carry that over into game 4. And that just wasn't the case. To me, the only rational explanation that I can really think of is the foul shooting struggles. I think he's 8 for 25 in this series. And I think that's really in his head, and it's preventing him from wanting to, be the aggressive Ben Simmons that we all want to see and attack the basket, because he doesn't want to draw the fouls and he doesn't want to go to the line and, be forced to knock those shots down. It's a lingering issue with him. And like we've said in the past, it comes out, especially in the postseason when teams, scheme to take Joel away or try to minimize Tobias. And then, it falls to him to step up. And like you said, he does a ton of other things on the floor. I still thought he played pretty good defense, on Trae Young throughout the night yesterday and things like that. But, this is the enigma that Ben Simmons is. When you need him to step up, sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't. And unfortunately, last night was the latter.
Yep, absolutely. I thought last night, there's nights where you say, hey, Ben, he set guys up. They hit their shots. They got open looks. He played great defense. He did that in the first half. He had a good first half. And then I got to wonder, and I said yesterday, Michael, the loss of Green would be bigger than people are going to give it credit for because he wasn't shooting well. But that's not always the case. He's the best three-point shooter in the corner in the entire league during the regular season. He shot the ball well in the Washington series. He hit 5 threes in one game. He hit 3 threes in another game. He did not shoot the ball well in the first 3 games here. However, his 40% from 3 made the defender have to go out on him. The defender thinks that even though he's not shooting well, at any moment he can get going. How much did not having Green and how much will not having Green affect this team?
It's huge, Mike. I think you nailed it. I think it was a loss that's underestimated by a lot of the Sixers fans because he wasn't shooting good and because he, had a tough time guarding Trae Young in game 1. I think people thought that the Sixers could just, brush off playing without him. And that's not the case at all because you see Korkmaz is half the player that Danny Green is, and Matisse Thybulle is half the player that Danny Green is. Matisse brings it on the defensive end. Korkmaz brings it on the offensive end in terms of the floor spacing. Danny does both. So you have him out there. There's not a drop off defensively like is the case when we saw with Korkmaz last night. And if you have him out there, there's not a drop off offensively like we saw. The Hawks gave Matisse, by my count, I think at least 3 wide open corner threes that he had in that game yesterday. That's, the Danny Green shot, like you said, and he didn't connect on any of them. So, to me, being able to have a guy out there that can play defense and can knock down shots to complement the Sixers stars was a huge part of the reason that they were so successful all season. And it's a huge part of the reason that they did not win that game last night. And I think moving forward, you saw Doc, he was juggling around with that 5th starter spot. He started Korkmaz. He went with Matisse for a while. He went with Shake for a while. He went with Maxey for a while. He just was having a hard time finding the replacement. Unfortunately, I think that's going to continue to be the case until Danny gets back out there.
Do they consider making a move in the starting lineup?
It's tough because, like we were just touching on, Matisse would obviously be – yeah, go ahead.
Here's why, Michael. I mean, you look at what they did defensively on Korkmaz. You can game plan. You can draw up 6, 7, 8 plays saying, hey, when Korkmaz in the game, if he comes off the bench, you're not really doing that because now it's like you script a bunch of plays in the NFL. Let's run these 15 plays. Well, if I know Korkmaz is starting the game, I'm going to go right after him for the first 6, 7 plays.
Right, and for that reason, I do think that Doc will consider making a move. But then you take the flip side of that coin and you start Matisse. How much is that going to impact Joel's spacing in the post when they're, basically handing him a wide open corner threes to take and the defense is not, Korkmaz when he's out there at least has the reputation of a shooter.
All leading to why losing Green is bigger than people gave it credit for.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an injury that, he's not the star player. He's not the all-star. So you want to say, this team could overcome that. But he was, to me, a huge glue guy for the regular season on both ends. And there, like you said, that's, he's going to be extremely missed.
Yep. I don't, and quite frankly, I thought Rivers said something. I don't know if it was last night or the night he got hurt, but he said he always says the right thing at the right time. You wonder last night when that game started to get a little bit towards the momentum, who in that huddle stepped in there and said, yo, let's go. Let's calm down. We got, who's that leader guy right now?
Yeah, and that's the third part of what Danny brings to the floor that we're missing right now, the intangibles. He brings the offensive floor spacing, he brings a solid perimeter defense, and he brings that championship experience. It's not a coincidence that he started for 3 different, franchises that went on to win a title with him starting. Not a coincidence, and he's, a huge factor. And he's still out there with the guys, but obviously when you're not on the court, your leadership is minimized. So, that's another part of what they're missing with him out.
I know a lot of frustration towards Ben Simmons, absolutely 100% warrants it in last night's game. But I was a little disappointed in Tobias Harris as well. When your first guy's not going, you're number 2. He had 20, which he had a good night. Efficient, but there's nights where that Harris has 28 to 30. I thought last night needed to be one of them.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. And I think in general, just the whole offense really looked out of sync and in disarray during that second half. They a lot of ISO ball and like one-on-one, lack of ball movement. And I think Tobias was, guilty of that. Like you said, he had a solid game, shot over 50% from the field and had 20. But, it's up to these guys in the situation. It's one thing for Ben to come out after the game and say, like, hey, I needed to be more aggressive. You need him to realize that in the moment. And the same with Tobias, I think, is he can say, look at his game and say, hey, I had 20 points. I shot 50% from the field. I had a pretty good game. But when you're out there with Joel and you're seeing him struggle, probably more than we've seen him struggle easily all season or in his career, something just needs to click for you to be like, hey, maybe I need to bump this shooting up to 25 shots, be a little bit more aggressive. And we just didn't see that from anyone, really, not Ben, not Tobias. And I think, obviously, that was a huge problem.
All right, MKB. So what's the adjustment? What's Doc Rivers, Sam Cassell, Dan Burke, and crew? Dave Yergin, what are they talking about? What are they watching? I know they're watching film. They're going to talk at 4 o'clock today. So what are they seeing on that film that they need to adjust to?
I mean, the number one thing I think obviously is Joel's health. I think they need to, try to figure out or talk to him at least and see how good, like how much is he going to be able to give. And I think that they'll have to try to run more sets for other guys. I think one of the ththings I noticed in the second half was, Joel's your bread and butter. He has been all season. But when he's like clearly struggling like he was in that game last night, I thought he kind of they were force feeding him the ball in the post and it just wasn't there. I would have liked to see some more plays drawn up for, like you said at the top, Seth Curry, who I thought had a great game and kind of disappeared down the stretch. It's because he wasn't getting touches. Obviously, I think they should draw up more sets to get Ben going downhill and going to the basket like they did early in the second half of game 3 to, get him getting aggressive and getting in the flow of the game because that wasn't there yesterday. And then same with Tobias, try to get him to hunt some more mismatches, maybe try to get, Kevin Huerter or Trae Young on him in the post where he can take advantage of it. But, to me, that was a game where it was execution was poor and obviously the play of some of your guys, mainly Joel, was poor. It wasn't necessarily a game where I would panic and completely adjust the game plan. I thought defensively they were like pretty solid up until the end. There was some errors, but overall I think it's a matter of they just need to to draw a little bit better offensively and get more out of their their main guys.
One thing, Doc brought it up and he actually used an expletive. I mean, he said they just out bleeping worked us last night.
Yeah.
That's an unacceptable. I know Michael Malone tried to say his team quit on him. That didn't work. They got swept out of there. Doc saying that they got outworked. And obviously that's the message was, I thought John Collins was a big difference maker in that game. And of course, he had a couple dunks and it just changed the energy in that place, man. It felt like, but was that, you just said it defensively, they gave up 103. I mean, that's not a terrible defensive night, but the effort, is that something that you're watching and saying, man, they just, not only did they not have their best game, they didn't bring it.
Yeah, and I thought especially in the first half, I mean, things started to go downhill, obviously really bad in that third quarter. But I thought there was a huge missed opportunity in that first half where they really could have been up, put their foot on the Hawks' throat and took a commanding lead. And I thought there was a lot of, sloppy play, turnovers. And then that carried over into that third quarter, like you said, where John Collins, and I think he had 3 putback dunks in the third quarter. And, his energy and electricity got the crowd back into it. The other players started feeding off it, and the Sixers couldn't match that energy. Maybe you can chalk that up to it being a road game and the Hawks knowing that if they went down 3-1, it would have probably been a curtain call for them. But it's inexcusable to me when you're the top team and you have the chance to go up 3-1 in a series where your best player is hampered by an injury, and the more rest that you could get him, the better. And the series where you're going to potentially play the winner is now locked at 2-2, and there potentially could go 7 games with some injuries that the Nets are dealing with now. I think with all that going on, you need to come out with the attitude of like, hey, we need to take care of this business now to put ourselves in the best position moving forward. And they just didn't do that, and it was obviously very disappointing.
All right, last thing for MKB here. Obviously, the pick and roll. They pick and rolled the Sixers to death the other night. I thought Trae Young was brilliant, even though he didn't shoot the ball all that well. I thought, one of the things about people I think miss on Simmons, he controls the pace, and they play at the pace and the style that they want to play. I thought Young's took that from them last night and played the way he wanted to play. Even though he missed, he controlled, man. 18 assists. He was driving. He was like one of those Navy option quarterbacks. He just pitched it at the right time, passed it at the right time, floated it at the right time. That's something that they're going to have to figure out in Game 5 if Embiid is not They almost played better without him defensively. Well,
yeah, and that's the big thing. Like
defensively.
He was, like you said, he was 8 for 26 from the field, which I think shows that the primary defender did a pretty good job on him, whether it was Ben or Matisse, like making him take difficult shots. But to me, it was the secondary defense and the help defense. Like as soon as Trey saw daylight or got an opportunity, he was dishing that thing off, and there was just too many cuts that were not defended well, too many open shooters on the perimeter, and things like that. And Trey did exactly what you want your superstar to do when things aren't going your way. He shot only 8 of 25 or 26 from the floor, I believe, but he had 18 assists. I mean, what else? When you're not shooting well, there's not much else you could do. I thought, like you said, especially in the second half, he controlled the tempo, he controlled the flow, and he basically controlled the Sixers defense. Instead of them being on the attack and forcing him to react, he was controlling and forcing the Sixers defense to react. And too many times they were just a step slow.
All right, MKB, let me get a couple thoughts on tonight. Looks like Harden's going to play. Is that enough, just having Harden out there?
I don't know, Mike. To me, I thought this was the Bucks were dead in the water after 2 games. I thought this was, potentially a sweep, and now we're looking at 2-2. Obviously,
not alone there. Most people did, bud.
Right, that is true. But now, with these injuries, the Bucks seem to have the momentum, and with Harden, it's tough. We saw in the regular season when he first came back off the injury, it's a hamstring. So it's not something he can't really be doing a lot of conditioning. In the meantime, I think it's going to take him a little bit of time to work back into the flow of the game. So, to me, this is a pick 'em either way. It's in Brooklyn, so I guess I'll give the nod to the Nets. But, this series has got, a whole lot more interesting over the past couple games. For sure.
Harden's going to try to play. Irving is definitely out. So you're going to try to get Harden back tonight. We'll see how that goes. Out west, we've got the Clippers. I mean, hey, it's 2-2 all of a sudden out there, too. What kind of adjustments were made in that series?
It's something about the Clippers this year and starting slow in series. It's a second straight series. They went down 0-2 and then won the next 2 games. They did the same thing against Dallas. And it's just a matter of them, I think, finding their flow and playing their game. Paul George offensively has been much better over the past 2 games. I think they've done a better job of defending Donovan Mitchell, trapping him a little bit, double teaming him a little bit, trying to get the ball out of his hands because he was, torching them in the first 2 games, much like Luka was in the first round. So I think the Clippers, a lot of their issues are focus related, and I think now that they, just like in that first series, now that they got their focus together, I think they could pull this one out.
All right, Michael Kasky-Blomain covers the NBA for CBS Sports, and are you going to be in Philly tomorrow night, the game?
Yeah, I'll be there.
I'm 50-50 on that one.
Oh yeah,
I'm thinking about it. I got I haven't been to a game the whole year.
It'd be a good one for you to make your debut.
I know, man. I'm either that or I'm waiting for a game 7, maybe. I don't know. You think it gets there?
Sunday night? Right. I picked the Sixers in 6 before the series started, so I'm going to stick with that. I think hopefully as long as Joel can stay healthy, they bounce back in tomorrow night and then take care of business in Atlanta in Game 6.
I think I had Sixers. I know I had Sixers in 6. I think you're right about that. It all depends on what Embiid we get on Wednesday night. I think that's a big one. We'll keep our eyes on that. By the way, Doc Rivers talking in 18 minutes. I know you got to get ready for that. MKB, the real Mike KB on Twitter. And he, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk on the hotline. All right, bud.
Give me a shout if you head down there tomorrow, Mike.
I will do. Thanks, man.
See you, man.
All right, there he goes. Michael Kasky-Blomain, of course, covered the Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.com, and he has since moved on nationally to CBS Sports, but he's still kind enough to join us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as one of the things we talk about Danny Green. One of the things, too, about Green is the floor spacing, and he hits that big 3 in the corner. He allows the space, as Michael mentioned, for Embiid. Embiid had a lot less room to roam last night. So did Ben Simmons. Danny Green, is he the difference maker for this team? Sometimes it's that little role player. There's a reason Danny Green has 2 rings back-to-back years, Toronto, L.A., just having that kind of guy sometimes. Got to have him. That's why Sam Cassell, guys like that, they're not the stars of the team. They're the glue. Green's the glue. And the glue right now is like that cheap Gorilla Glue or that stuff that guy on that commercial, the Flex Seal. That's what the Sixers are using right now. Flex Seal. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. By the way, got to give a quick shout out to my man Jason Downing. He found the Hazy Pup IPA beer. sent me a picture. I'm on a mission now to go get that beer, Jay Downing. I don't know. He found it somehow. He found it somewhere down here. So I need everybody listening to go to your local liquor store and say, yo, can you guys get Hazy Pup IPA? It's Golden Road Brewery. Golden Road's everywhere. They got wolf pups all over the place. So it should be able to be done. Good job, Jay Downing, finding that, man. I love that picture last night. I showed my girlfriend. I said, look what I found. Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. 348 on the Sports Bash. I'm Mike Gill, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. For anybody out there who was wondering, the Sixers Game 7 and 6 times have been released. They will play Friday night at 7:30 for Game 6, and they will play on Sunday night at 8 o'clock if there is a Game 7 that would need to be played. As we just talked with Michael Kasky-Blomain, he thinks the Sixers end this thing in 6. I had 6 at the beginning, so I guess I'll kind of stick with that. I don't know why people are like, hey, I had it 6 at the beginning. You know, you now have more information. You can change your mind based on the information that you now have that you didn't have before. At the beginning of the series, I didn't have as much information as I have now. So based on the information I have, I'm going to stay with 6. And my reasoning is this. I think Embiid and I think Simmons and I think Tobias Harris got a little bit of a punch in the face and realized what, needs to kind of be tightened up. And if they don't, look, the team it's okay to be like, if that doesn't happen, that means they're not as good or not who we thought they were. The Atlanta Hawks did not set the world on fire and execute late in that game. I think they were the beneficiary of some pretty bad play by Joel Embiid, to be honest with you. I mean, if Joel Embiid is 100% healthy or 80% healthy or back on his game, or even the Joel Embiid that he was in the first half, Embiid had a pretty good first half of the game. He got started on a good note last night. I think he had like 11 points in the first half or a double-double in the first half. Something happened in that game. He went to the locker room, and who knows what happened back there. But the Hawks didn't, execute perfectly down the stretch. I don't know that the Hawks in a late-game situation are really, ready in a big, big, big moment. And as these games get deeper, as we get to Game 5 and 6 and 7, they still have to hit some big shots. They did not shoot the ball well. That's one concern, though. They won that game and didn't shoot the ball well. They have another good shooting game left in them. Whatever deficiencies that you look at from this Hawks team, they were able to overcome last night because of Trae Young. By the way, did anybody notice Trae Young had a huge ice pack on his shoulder for much of the night last night, and they never mentioned it at all during the broadcast? I don't know what was going on with that, but he had a shoulder pack of ice on his shoulder, and he was sitting at the announcer's table ready to check into the game and had the big old ice pack up there. Yeah, he looked like he threw Spencer Howard's 4 innings. But there's a lot that the Hawks could take from that game last night. If Joel Embiid is not the Joel Embiid he got in the first 3 games, that's a problem. I'm not saying anything that you don't know, but someone else has to step up. And that's where I think if they know going in, it's almost like when Embiid got hurt in the game against Washington and then left, they did not play well in that game. And then the next game, they knew that Embiid was not playing, and they played much better and waxed the Wizards. I think you'll see something similar to that in game number 5. And then in game number 6, we shall see. That game would be on Friday night. After being shut out in the first quarter, though, Trae Young, man, he tied an NBA career high for assists, 18. And his career high, 18. I thought he was marvelous last night at finding guys. He's only the 6th player in NBA history with 25 points scored and 40 points created off of assists in a playoff. He accounted for 65 points last night. He generated 65 points last night. Trae Young did. Unbelievable. Now, imagine if they actually shot the ball well. According to ESPN stats and information, the Hawks converted on only 19% of the shots that came off of Trae Young passes last night. Second worst contested shooting in the postseason since the stat came around. So Young could have been even better last night had they been shooting the ball any better. Now, Atlanta turned the ball over a bunch of times that early in that game, it was very helter-skelter. It was an ugly kind of start for both teams. Then the Sixers started to pull away. They go up by 18. And then God knows what happens, man. Where did that game kind of turn for you? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Where did that game kind of turn? It had to be when Embiid went back to that locker room, right? Embiid was 0 for 12 from the field in the second half. It's the most attempts without a make in a playoff game in 25 years. Essentially, it's the worst half of basketball ever for a playoff game. Think about this. Embiid's averaging 35 points and 10 rebounds. I mean, he's putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers, and he only had 17 last night. Wow. Crazy. All right, when we come back, football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Yesterday, the Eagles added to the quarterback room. What's the message there? Plus, we're going to talk quarterbacks inside the NFC East and around the league. Andrew DeCecco, Football at 4, Inside the Birds podcast, will join us coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. It is all brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Blatt Kia, 6211 Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. It's Football at 4, and it's coming up next.
play-by-play home for the Eagles,
Touchdown!
Sixers,
and
Flyers.
He scored!
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. 97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DeCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you this hour by Prop Swap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the Prop Swap app today. I am Mike Gill. Andrew DeCecco rides shotgun with me during Tuesday's edition of Football at 4. We will examine quarterbacks in the NFL. There's a lot of quarterback stories going on. I want to get Andrew's opinion on a bunch of this stuff as we always talk football, 4 o'clock right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. So let's bring him in from Inside the Birds, Andrew DeCecco, as he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Andrew, what's up, my man?
Hey, Mike, doing well. How are you?
All right, brother. And, of course, get your opinion. Yesterday, the Eagles made a signing. They added a quarterback to their quarterback room. And a lot of people, looking at Nick Mullins, solid number 3 quarterback here. And obviously, the Eagles, we talked about it last time you were on. Do they go down the road of getting like an undrafted rookie free agent and try to work with him? Or do they go get a more veteran guy? Well, they didn't only get a veteran guy. They got a guy who has started 16 games in the NFL. So he's got some pretty good experience.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Mullins, he started 16 games in the NFL, played in 19 of them, 26 years old, averages just under 250 yards passing in the games that he started in. Doesn't really, I think he averaged 7 yards per pass attempt. So, I mean, he's not a guy that's going to push the ball down the field. His arm's very mediocre, but he's very, very well versed in the West Coast offense. And I think ultimately one of the biggest winners out of that signing are those back end of the receivers vying for roster spots, right? Because when you look at the past preseasons, whether it's been Dane Evans or Matt McGloin or Christian Hackenberg, I mean, a lot of these receivers, whether it's Greg Ward, Rashard Davis, or Bryce Treggs or whomever it was in past years that were kind of on the outside looking in for a roster spot, I mean, they were sort of at the mercy of the third or fourth string quarterback in those games, and they were very much off the mark, or they were missing wide open guys. And a lot of times, if you're a receiver trying to get a latch onto a roster, I mean, that's your audition. You may not make that football team, but you may be trying to audition for somebody else. And now you have a quarterback that's played a number of games and has that experience.
I'm glad you brought that up. I brought that up with Jeff yesterday, is that, that also helps not only the quarterback room, but the development of the John Hightowers, the Quez Watkins, the guys who, hey, the quarterback that I'm working with isn't really hitting me where I need to be hit. Mullins, at least you have a guy who has started 16 games and had a fair level of, of experience. That could not only help the quarterback room, but also help those back-end receiver guys. I thought that's a very smart, observation that you make there.
Yeah, and that's one of those underlying things that a lot of people may not realize when they're assessing the preseason. But a lot of these receivers can play, but and everybody wants a young quarterback to sort of develop. But a lot of times, those are the growing pains in the preseason these young quarterbacks go through, and they don't necessarily go through their progressions. They don't see guys that are open. They overthrow guys, and all of a sudden these drives stall, and these receivers aren't able to put their best film on. Put their best stuff on film, and a lot of times they end up on the practice squads, or they may not get a second chance. So, I mean, I think that's a very key signing here to kind of get better play in the latter stages of the preseason.
All right, so let me ask you this: is he here to be the number 3? Is he here? Nick Sirianni, he competition. I don't think anybody thinks he's going to be the starting quarterback here. But is the pressure on anybody here? Or is this just, hey, a smart third guy that will just help out the quarterback room?
Well, if we're to believe Nick Sirianni, he's preached competition from the moment he got here. Essentially, is opening press conference, he definitely stressed that. So I think that that's something that it's going to be a competition. Look, Joe Flacco is a long ways away from his days in Baltimore, where he was, making those throws healthy first and foremost. He hasn't been healthy, and we really haven't seen much of Joe Flacco. Obviously, he has a much more extensive and gaudy resume when stacked up against a 26-year-old Nick Mullins, but there's going to be competition there. Do I think that Nick Mullins has anywhere close to the physical attributes of a Joe Flacco? No. Flacco's still has one of the strongest arms in the NFL. And I ultimately think that he will be the second quarterback, but you're not just going to hand him this job. Like anybody else, he's going to have to compete for his roster, for his spot on the depth chart.
Yeah, and that's another thing. When I look at a guy like him, if you have to play him for 8-10 games, yeah, your season's probably going to go sideways a little bit. But I said this to Moshe yesterday, which it's not like Ben DiNucci coming in where he has to play one game that you essentially have no shot to win that game, or you have to game plan completely around the fact that you have very poor quarterback play. He can go win you a game or two if you need him for that. And that's where I find positives in moves like this and that also kind of tells me, I go back to this, Andrew, the message from the Eagles seems to be that they think they have a shot in this. That's why you make signings like Richard Rodgers and Nick Mullins.
Yeah, I think a signing like that certainly tells you that they want to make sure that they're bringing in the best possible depth to support whatever position it may be, add competition everywhere. And yeah, you're right. When you look at Nick Mullins, is he a guy that's going to win you 6, 7, 8 games if he had to start for a number of games? No. Like for 1, 2, maybe 3, if he had to step in. Yeah, because what he lacks in physical attributes, the rocket arm, the ability to move outside the pocket, he makes up for with his poise, his ball placement, his accuracy, and just his timing throws, which is essential to the West Coast offense. So there's a lot of things that he does well. I think that he could step in for a game or two and give them pretty high quality players. Like you said, it's not like a Ben DiNucci. This guy's been around for a little bit. He's still just 26 years old. We're interested to see how he adapts to the Eagles' offensive system. But yeah, it was a great value. It's a great signing first and foremost, and then we're going to see how he sort of battles with Joe Flacco this summer. Like I said, I think Joe Flacco is ultimately going to be the second quarterback, but we'll see how everything plays out.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people, you look around the league and you look for number 3, as you mentioned before. It's a lot of unproven guys. The Eagles, we know they value that position. We heard what they said about the quarterback factory. I'm sure they regret that, but bringing in a guy like Mullins certainly gives them another veteran guy in that quarterback room. All right, Andrew DeCheck is with us. We want to kind of focus on quarterbacks today. One of the quarterback stories is in Chicago, where Matt Nagy came out today, Andrew, and said, we're going to stick with Andy Dalton. Justin Fields is number 2. He essentially said, there's nothing that Justin Fields could do to win that starting job. So do you agree with what Nagy's kind of message is? If Nick Sirianni came out and said Hurts is the guy, I think people would like that. So do we like Nagy saying that Dalton's the guy?
Well, he's standing by his veteran quarterback, and there's a lot of ways you could look at this, right? I mean, he could just be trying to light a fire under Justin Fields by saying, listen, man, maybe it lights sparks a fire, and he wants to go out and prove him wrong, that he should seize that job, and and he's going to go out and earn that with a lights out training camp. Or it could just be him not wanting to necessarily throw his rookie quarterback into the fire when the roster around him isn't necessarily the best for him to get off to a successful start in the NFL, right? I mean, Andy Dalton is a good veteran to sort of direct that offense. He's not really going to elevate it per se, but he may be a guy that can sort of navigate things while Justin Fields sort of finds his footing in the NFL. You don't necessarily want to stunt a rookie quarterback's growth by throwing him out into the deep end if he's not necessarily ready. So that could be one message, but I wouldn't. Justin Fields, I was very high on him coming into the draft. I had him as my second-rated quarterback. Wouldn't surprise me if he makes the decision very tough this summer, and that's a good thing for Chicago. I mean, he has all the tools. I just don't know if they want to throw him in the deep end right away.
Right. I mean, sight unseen, and we all know what Andy Dalton is. The Chicago Bears made the playoffs last year, man. I mean, you're thinking to yourself, who gives them a better shot to grow from where they were last year to this year. And is Andy Dalton that guy? I mean, it's not like Dalton he's not the Andy Dalton that played for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, right at this point of his career, he's just a stabilizing veteran presence. Like I said, he's not going to give you these dynamic plays, these explosive plays. He's going to keep you in games, and he's a streaky player, right? So there's going to be those games where he just can't get anything going offensively. And at this point in Andy Dalton's career, he's in his early 30s. I think he might be 32 or 33 years old. You kind of know what you have in him. Maybe your best hope is just to get things off to a decent start and hope that he can keep you in playoff contention. But if this thing goes south, which it certainly can, certainly Andy Dalton's not a player that's going to elevate an offense. I mean, I think that they're going to have to turn it over. There could be a point in the season where they have to turn it over to Justin Fields.
Right. All right. How about in Washington, Andrew, where Ron Rivera is saying quarterback competition? He's got Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think everybody just assumes that he wins the job. Haskins is gone, but Tyler Heineke is there. So Fitzpatrick, Taylor Heineke, how do you see that kind of working out for the Washington football team?
Yeah, I mean, Taylor Heineke, that was a great story at the end of the last season. I don't know if he can consistently go out there and give you that sort of production. I think it was more of a product of the team not really knowing how to defend him. There wasn't a whole lot of tape on him, and he was just more of that undersized, scrappy quarterback that found ways to make plays, and the defense really just didn't have an answer for him. There's not a lot of game tape out there, but now if there is, I think you're gonna see a vastly different player. Now, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's just your typical journeyman that plays well in spurts, hasn't necessarily put anything. Obviously, he hasn't put it all together and been consistent enough for a team to kind of commit to him long term. He's proven that if you throw him into a team, he can kind of invigorate a little life. He has a good personality. He's a smart guy and can sort of lead an offense. But I mean, he's not a long-term option. They really need to. I don't think either of those guys, to answer your question, are long-term options. But I think this season it's going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick.
All right. Do you think that they are I don't want to say an outside or a long shot, but in the running to make a deal for Aaron Rodgers?
I think it's a long shot, but I think when you face any kind of question about your quarterback and you have ammo to do so, you're going to be in the conversation to get a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback in football.
Yeah. I know that that would really change the dynamics of the NFC East there. Let me ask you about the NFC East and Daniel Jones. I was reading something the other day about teams that did not make the playoffs last year and teams that could get back in. Two were in the NFC East. One was Dallas. The other was the Giants. I like what the Giants have done this season, but does Daniel Jones ultimately hold them back?
Yeah, I think so. You really didn't see that jump in his game last season. In fact, you sort of saw a regression, and he's just not consistent enough the Giants aren't good enough offensively to overcome their lackluster play at quarterback. It doesn't matter that you're getting Saquon back and everything else. He is their offense, right? I mean, when you take a quarterback high like the Giants did in Daniel Jones, you're expecting him to be a lot further along than where he is currently. And now all of a sudden you're looking at a liability at the quarterback position, and they have to sort of scheme around his deficiencies. The light just hasn't come on for him, and I think that he's easily the worst quarterback in the NFC East.
All right. I like to hear that, and I think a lot of people may agree with you. Of course, we don't know much about Jalen Hurts and where he kind of is. What about in New England, where Cam Newton came out and said Mac Jones was the right pick? He was the best player available. So he's certainly approaching this differently than other quarterbacks have when their team drafted a first-round pick there. So in New England, who do you anticipate, Newton or Jones?
That's an easy one for me. It's going to be Cam Newton. I think that Cam's going to rebound this season. Do I think he'll ever return to the Carolina Panthers in his prime, Cam Newton? Probably not, but I think that he's going to give the offense a lot more juice than Mac Jones can at this point, and being a rookie. And I never saw him as a viable contender to be the third quarterback or the third overall pick. I just thought he had a lot longer, steeper learning curve than some of those other guys. So I don't anticipate him being a factor this summer, and I think Cam Newton should kind of win that job running away.
If Cam Newton is the quarterback there. They did not make the playoffs last year. Are they a playoff team with him or Mac Jones this year?
Well, with the healthy Cam Newton, I think that they can squeak into the playoffs. I don't think that Cam Newton, like I said, he's been banged up over the years, and you started to see those injuries take a toll on his overall game. But I think if you scheme around what he's able to do really well and play to his strengths, I think that you can muster out some offense there. Now, the receiving core they had last season was abysmal, and they need to surround him with better pieces as well, because I felt too often that Cam Newton was trying to do it all himself, and he just isn't that kind of player right now. But I think if the pieces are in place, I think they can be a team that squeaks into the playoffs with him under center.
All right, we are kind of looking at quarterbacks around the league. There's a lot of OTAs going on these last couple of weeks, and we're starting to see the beginning of them. Another one is in Denver. Like to hear your take on Drew Lock against Teddy Bridgewater in Denver.
Drew Lock's going to go in there, obviously being the favorite. Teddy Bridgewater, they're very similar if you look at what they've accomplished in the NFL. Drew Lock is someone that he had very high hopes, just like Teddy Bridgewater did when he was coming into the NFL, but they almost have somewhat of a game manager element to their game. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater, certainly at this point, you know exactly what he is. Drew Lock, with all the pieces around him, Denver should have one of the strongest offenses in football. There's no reason not to. And much like with the Giants, I thought that Drew Lock held them back last season. Didn't take the step forward that many thought, including myself, that was going to happen. I think Teddy Bridgewater is a safer option. I think that he can sort of navigate that offense, direct them, lead them to a handful of wins. Their defense is strong enough to keep them in playoff contention, but I'm not sort of enamored with either option, to be honest with you.
All right. I guess another battle. This is fun. There's a lot of them going on, and this is very fluid. What happens in New Orleans? Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill. How do you kind of see that one going in the training camp?
Yeah, that's a brutal that's a brutal duo there. I mean, I think the right thing would be to go with Jameis Winston. He's a traditional quarterback. He has an arm. He knows that he can throw touchdowns, but along with that, he also takes a lot of chances. Doesn't necessarily see the field well at this stage of his career, which is a little alarming. So he's going to turn the football over quite a bit, but he can throw the football far better than anything that Taysom Hill has ever shown or can do right now. Taysom Hill is a more dynamic option, but I think he's better utilized as more of a gadget player. Throw him in for a handful of plays a game. If he has to sit back there and drop back, the Saints are going to be very easy to defend.
I look forward to a lot of these, and I guess if you look around the league, they are the biggest ones. You got Chicago, as we mentioned, with the rookie out there. You've got the New Orleans situation that we touched on. Denver. Houston, I guess, is another one. We have no idea what's going to happen in Houston. I guess if Deshaun Watson – do you anticipate Deshaun Watson playing this year?
I do. I think he's going to ultimately end up playing. I think it's going to be more of it's going to come down on the wire, but I think he suits up this season.
Because I guess then you would have Tyrod Taylor, right? Would be your other option?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So there's I guess a possibility out there. So we're kind of looking through. We got all of the the pretty high profile quarterback competitions going on, and one of them in Washington, as we mentioned, one in Chicago. I guess there is the one in New Orleans. You've got one in Denver, Houston, possible with what's going on out there, and New England, which you think that will be Cam Newton. So there you go. There's a little bit look of what's going on. I guess Miami's interesting too if they end up making a trade. I don't know how much faith they had in Tua after the first year there.
Yeah, it seemed like they were a little hesitant to anoint him as a long-term starter. Tua doesn't have a strong arm. He showed. I mean, he's very frail. If you look at him, you wonder if he's going to be able to withstand the rigors that come with playing that quarterback position. If he's going to be able to, they have a lot of pieces around. They built up that offensive line the right way. I just don't know if he's going to be that guy that can sort of make the most and capitalize on the pieces that are there. I think that they need he's a little bit undersized, not a strong arm, I think that he showed some things last season that kind of caused a little cause for concern. So, I mean, I think they would be in the running to add a quarterback too, although it would have to be somebody of the caliber of an Aaron Rodgers, of course. I think that given their investment in Tua, it would have to be a substantial upgrade.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. I got to say, when Tua was coming out, I don't want to say I was a hater or anything. I didn't think he was going to be a tank for Tua. I didn't think it would be very worth it. I don't think he was changing a franchise. And so far, that seems to be the case. All right, Andrew Checo, Football at 4. There you go. We'll be taking a look throughout the offseason at different storylines, and we'll start breaking down some of the divisions and get thoughts on all that and more. Andrew Checo, InsideTheBirds.com, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline for today's edition of Football at 4. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, man. Have a good one.
You do the same. That was good conversation as we will continue this offseason with a look at all the quarterbacks and, all of the different storylines that are continuing because training camp is about a month away for NFL teams. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. When we come back, do you remember things that happened on this day, June 15th? We'll break them down for you coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN this hour, brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. All right, on this day, these are things that happened on this day, June the 15th. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. My producer is Josh Henning. How you be?
How you doing?
So tonight on game night, Brian Toporek at 6:20. Give me a brief synopsis of what you saw in that game last night, in your opinion.
The team decided to stop playing defense, and there was nobody on the court who could turn around to the team and say, hey, guys, what are we doing here? Nobody stepped up and filled a leadership void last night.
I think that was the bigger problem. The leadership void was nobody stepped in and said, all right, this needs to stop. We need to stop this run. They have the energy. Let's stop this.
I've always asked this question, Mike, and this is a problem for a lot of young players in sports. It's at all levels. There always has to be that guy in the room, on the field, in the action, in the play of the game, who has to be able to turn around to the other guys and say, hey, wake up, guys. Come on. What are we doing here?
Well, there you have a guy, and he wasn't there last night. So they all start looking around and saying, now who's that guy? It was nobody last night.
It was nobody, and that's a huge problem in itself.
All right, these are things that happened on this day, June 15th, 1938. Pitcher from the Reds, Johnny Vandermeer, no-hit the Brooklyn Dodgers. It was the first night game ever at Ebbets Field. It was also Vandermeer's second consecutive no-hitter. He's the only pitcher who's ever done that. 2 back-to-back no-hitters, 2 in a row. I don't know if we'll ever see that again.
Probably not, especially with the foreign substance memo that came out today from Major League Baseball and the whole fiasco.
That whole thing is very passive-aggressive by baseball.
Oh, of course it is. Because they were okay with it until someone called them out on the carpet.
Right, but they also don't want to penalize. They're just hoping that it goes away.
Well, the penalty also is really dumb because so here's how it works. If you get caught and they deem that you're guilty, you get 10 days suspension with pay, but your team can't replace you on the roster with somebody else. I'm sorry, what?
That's interesting.
You're
penalizing the team.
You're penalizing a team more than the player.
Well, the player's out for 10 days.
With pay, though.
Well, I think that's more CBA, probably. You can't just take their money away in the middle of the season.
But now you're punishing
I don't mind punishing the team, though. You're letting your team down. And what happens? The team is now being punished because you did something wrong.
Yeah, but shouldn't you be not being there be the punishment enough?
I have no problem with that. I like the fact that they're not allowing so now the team, they're saying, if you don't want this to penalize you, you guys better crack down on your players.
Well, according to reports, I heard Jeff Passan saying this morning that the plan is a bunch of baseball teams right now are having bullpen sessions where they're telling the players, we want to see you pitch with no rosin, no nothing on your hand, so we understand what you can and can't do.
Unbelievable. This is pretty crazy.
That's where we're at.
On this day, 1979, Rocky II was released in movie theaters. It's the sequel to the 1976 Best Picture winner, grossed $200 million. Where's Rocky II on the list?
Of what? Like all-time boxing movies or just Rocky movies?
The Rocky movies.
I would say that. Oh, hold on. Are we only the Rocky movies, or are we including the Creed spin-off movies?
Up to Rocky.
Up to Rocky Balboa 6.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say probably, depending on who you ask, Rocky 2 is in the top 3.
Well, of course, everybody might have a different answer.
I would say that it depends on my mood because
here's the one issue with 2. A lot of it is replaying 1.
Yeah. But people like 2 sometimes more because in that one he actually wins.
Correct.
So it's a little more heartwarming. At the end of Rocky 1, there's a whole scene where he's yelling Adrian, his face is all busted up and he lost, but you had the winning music behind it. People were like, but you lost. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, but see, that's good because every movie always ends with the guy winning.
True.
This was one where it was still a feel-good story even though he lost.
Correct. Yeah. That's true. Very true.
84, Thomas Hearns retains the light middleweight title with a second-round knockout of Roberto Duran at Caesar's Palace.
Roberto Duran, they talk about this in the Kings documentary, which I had the director a couple weeks ago. Duran did not train properly for the fight. All he did was drink and spend time with women for the entire training camp. And he made fun of Hearn, saying, I can knock you out by not training. And then he got knocked out.
It's good stuff there.
Now, if you haven't seen the Kings documentary on Showtime, please watch it. It's really good stuff.
1985, Doug Williams and the Arizona Outlaws beat Steve Young and the LA Express on this day, June 15th, 21-10, in front of 8,400 fans at John Shepard Stadium of Los Angeles Pierce Junior College. An abysmal attendance prompted the Express to move from the Memorial Coliseum to the 16,000-seat stadium, the smallest ever to host a USFL game. Think about that. Doug Williams and Steve Young are Super Bowl quarterbacks. They're doling out in front of 8,400 fans at a junior college.
Yeah, that was talked about in the USFL book, too, by Jeff Perlman, Football for a Buck, about how the owner of the Los Angeles team grossly was ill-prepared to run a football team.
Yeah, well, that whole league was poorly managed. The owners were just a hodgepodge group of guys who definitely had different ambitions in this world.
Hey, Mike, they're just a bunch of guys.
That's right. 1988, Bull Durham was released in theaters. It's an iconic baseball dramedy. It grossed $58 million.
Now, where does Bull Durham rank for you among baseball movies?
It's all right.
Didn't really push the pile?
Yeah, it's not like, that's another Kevin Costner. He's in every baseball movie there is. Now, do you like Bull Durham better or For the Love of the Game?
Oh, For the Love of the Game. Easily.
Okay.
I love the whole, his concept. You engage the mechanism. He's in the zone. He's trying to finish the game. At the end of the game, he can't finish it. He goes through his whole life story. He's dating the girl. His life's a mess. I love the whole thing. It's great.
All right, 1996. Here you go. This is a good one. Roy Jones Jr. played point guard in the USBL for the Jacksonville Barracudas in a game with the Treasure Coast Tropics. That night, he successfully defended the IBS super middleweight title with an 11-round stoppage of Eric Lucas. It's the first time an athlete played in two paid professional sports on the same day, 1996.
Okay, now, so does Deion Sanders' accomplishment not count?
I don't know that he played in both games. I think he attended. I don't think he played for the Braves.
Okay, so they're hyper classified.
I guess maybe. I don't know.
That was a 30 for 30 about how he jumped on the helicopter and they flew out there.
Yeah, but the whole thing was he didn't play in that game, right?
I thought it was he didn't start.
Maybe. Well, speaking of the USBL, that was the old Atlantic City Seagulls.
Yes.
We had a now I've heard that the Atlantic City Seagulls are coming back.
Are they?
I could have sworn I just read that somewhere today.
Wow. That would be wild.
Right. Not in the USBL, in in some other league. But they were a good team for a while there.
As long as it's not LeVar Ball's league, we'll be fine.
No, it's I'll have to look it up. But the USBL was the league that the Seagulls played in.
Right.
And I think R. Kelly, played for the Seagulls.
Yeah, he did. That was he came with an entourage and everything. It was bizarre.
Jeez. On this day, 2001, the Lakers beat the Sixers in Game 5 of the NBA Finals to complete at the time the best playoff run in NBA history, 15-1, as well as going undefeated on the road. The Warriors would go on to narrowly beat the Lakers' record to a best-of-7 first-round series. The Warriors went 16-1 one year. And the Lakers went 15-1. This 83 Sixers were 12-1. But it was on this day that magical run in the summer of 2001 came to a close.
What was the better fill-in-the-blank in one team? The 83 Sixers, that Lakers team, or the Warriors team?
83 Sixers are widely regarded as one of the best NBA championship teams of all time.
They should be.
The Lakers, of course, you had Kobe and Shaq. That Warriors team, you had Durant on that one in 17.
Yes, that was like the first year of Durant, actually.
See, it's hard to put the Sixers in there because the style is so different with the Warriors.
It is, but I think that Sixers team could have taken the Lakers team 7 games, maybe even beat. Because outside the Lakers, after Shaq and Kobe, there really wasn't anybody else.
Yeah, they weren't. They had.
They didn't have a third guy. The Sixers had a third guy.
Derek Fisher.
The fact you said that with a straight face was a good job by you.
2008, down to his last stroke at Torrey Pines. Isn't that where they are this year?
I think so, yeah.
Tiger Woods sinks a 12-foot birdie putt to force an 18-hole playoff against Rocco Mediate in the U.S. Open.
I believe this is the first year since that.
I think it is.
It was over.
Pretty sure.
Phil Mickelson said he's been doing nothing except for focusing on golf the last several days because he really wants to win this U.S. Open. He's never won it.
This one's interesting. 2011, the Bruins beat the Canucks 4-0 Game 7 to become Stanley Cup champions for the first time since 1972. A riot breaks out in the streets of Vancouver after the game. That happened yesterday for when they lost in 94 against the Rangers.
I was going to say, did we just talk about this?
Yeah. I mean, what's going on, Vancouver? I thought this was this peaceful, beautiful town.
I'm telling you, man, Vancouver's got a problem, and some people wonder if they deserve a sports team. That's why they're not the Grizzlies anymore.
Jeez.
They didn't support the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies got run out of town. Also, that was the Tim Thomas Bruins, too. Remember Tim Thomas?
Yeah, the goalie.
2 years, like a
then he
superstar?
kind of went off the rocker or something, didn't he?
Well, he started getting really political, and the team told him to quiet it down. He decided to retire so he'd be quiet.
Tom from the Villa says Rocky 2, 1, 4, 3, 6, 5. That's his Rocky rating.
It's hard to decide which one the worst is because both 5 and 6 have a lot of problems. I personally think 5's the worst of all.
Well, that's the Tommy Morrison.
Yeah. Stupid street fight.
Yeah, that'd be the street fight, that whole thing. I mean, if he was going to fight in Rocky 6, was that the one with, what's his name, Antonio Tarver?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was
But I think 5's worse.
a little cartoonish.
5's worse.
But if he was going to fight Antonio Tarver in 6, he should have fought Tommy Gunn. Right? Instead of the street fight, he should have played. Because I wonder how old he was in that one, like in story.
Good question.
Like, how old was Rocky's character
He's
in
supposed
Rocky
to be like,
5?
I think he's supposed to be like 48 or 50 at that point.
Yeah, I mean, like, George Foreman was still fighting, so that's realistic.
Right. It's not totally unbelievable.
Yeah, and then when he fought Union Kane, he was, in his 60s, I think.
I have to go double check that.
Pretty sure. They were trying to get him cleared to fight because he was, like, in his 60s.
Yeah, that sounds.
Although he was still in good shape.
Well, I mean, Sylvester Stallone. That's why the training montage sequences in Creed are so great because Stallone's in good shape, so he's looking over at Michael B. Jordan
Yeah.
like, "Come on, kid, pick it up."
All right, that's what happened on this day, June 15th. I'm Mike Gill. Good stuff. All right, coming up, we will read off your comments on the stream. I see text messages continuing to come in. I'll give the text message number one more time, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. You can get involved that way. If you want to give a call, 609-573-3776, 609-573-3776. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. All right, it's 4:45 on a Tuesday, and we've got plenty to do. I'm looking back at some things from last night's game, the Sixers and the Hawks. I got a lot of text messages I want to answer here that you guys have been popping my way throughout the show. Mike, I'm very concerned with the series. Can't forget it took a miracle shake, 14 points in 14 minutes. Sixers should be down 3-1. Seems to me Young is out-coaching Doc. Young? You mean McMillan, or are you talking about just Trae Young is out-coaching Doc? Look, again, we put too much blame on the coach. How many times are you guys going to realize that the coach only has so much of an impact? You text in, you blame the coach almost every single night. Your team can't win 50-plus games, and, it's – I mean, Joel Embiid did not play well last night. Joel Embiid was not himself. He did not play well. So immediately it goes to it's Doc Rivers' fault. It's crazy. People are crazy, man. Right? 609-403-0973, the text board. I got more messages I want to get to here in a second. This is from Whoop 100. He says Ben Simmons is an overrated player, and it's criminal that he gets a max deal, gets treated like a baby instead of a grown man. I guess, that's people's opinion. He's been a 3-time All-Star. He's first-team all-defensive team. He's the second defensive player of the year. Maybe he is overrated. I don't know. People, I guess Whoop 100 knows a lot more about basketball than others, and they're all wrong. Everybody else is wrong. Whoop 100 and the rest know more about basketball, I guess. Maybe Ben Simmons is an overrated player. I think if you ask every basketball coach, maybe there's some out there that don't like what he does, I'm assuming. I think a majority of basketball coaches out there, I'd say probably 80% would love to have Ben Simmons on their roster. Maybe he's not for everybody. But, hey, it is what it is. The team has been consistently pretty good in the Simmons era. And by the way, I thought he played terrible last night. So just to throw that out there. In the second half of that game, I thought he was terrible last night. Tony Skins is watching the show on YouTube. He says, so Simmons is not going to shoot. That we all know. But now he's not going to the basket because he does not want to go to the line. Does any other team cater to one player the way the Sixers do Simmons? That's a good question. Does any other team cater to one player the way the Sixers do Simmons? The Rockets used to cater to Harden. The Sixers used to cater to Iverson, but differently. They just said, go ahead and score. Forget about the others. This is the opposite. He says, don't worry about scoring. Let the others score. Again, I'm going back to that. I thought, Simmons played terrible last night in the second half of that game. Inexcusable. It's inexcusable. And again, we blame the coach a lot. Remember, Brett Brown couldn't get Ben Simmons to do this, this, and this. Now all of a sudden, Doc Rivers can't do it. Matt in Delaware texts in. He says, Mike, I can't stand how people blame coaching. It must have been Doc's fault that Joel shot 0 for 12. I wish I could blame all my coaches for every bad game I had. 100%. If Joel Embiid makes 2 out of 12 last night, they win the game. And somehow we blame the coach for that. It's crazy to me. I think it's just a lack of depth of knowledge. It's just an easy thing to say is it's the coach's fault. It's because a lot of people, they don't understand the intricacies of the X's and O's of a game, spacing, all of that kind of stuff. So they just go, it's like the easiest thing they can find. It's got to be the coach's fault. Tom in Summers Point, you're on 97.3. What's up, Tom?
Michael, hey, listen, this team's not where they're at with Brett Brown. I really believe Doc Rivers is the coach for this team. But here's where it's starting to get concerning. It looks to me that in the fourth quarter, when you want to beat the Sixers, all you have to do is get physical with Embiid, and he just curls up and just – Mike, name one game that you ever seen him get physical and take a game over against good teams, because that's what he's saying now. Look, he just turned – Mike, you take that game over. You're trying to be the best in the game.
Well, come on. To be fair, Tom, to be fair. Now, let's step back for a second. He averaged 35 points and 15 rebounds throughout these playoffs. he did not play that well last
in
night.
That close game. Mike, listen, in that game yesterday, and Doc Rivers, this is where I give him credit. The game's 2-2. Atlanta just shoots a 3. It's 5-2. He calls a timeout. He brings the team over. And guess what? They came out and dominated that game. But when the game got close in the fourth quarter, Mike, they got physical with Embiid, and he could not get it done. It doesn't matter what you do in the first half of the game, Mike. It's when the game's on the line.
Yeah.
And he just got out physical. When it was Zaire Williams, he was on the bench. He wanted no parts of him. And that's how you beat the Sixers, Mike. And listen, I don't know that they can't win a championship, but
look, it's hard to go up. There was obviously something. There was
Mike.
obviously something wrong with him last night, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you're
but Mike,
talking about
that's
late in the
huge.
game. He was like that after he went to the locker room in the first quarter, and once he came back from the locker room, I don't know what happened back there, but he just was. I looked at his shot
You know,
chart.
Mike, you put him on the bench, Mike. You put him on the bench, Mike. You take him out of the game then, because guess what? He hurt the team. He didn't help the team.
Oh,
He
you're
hurt
right.
the
I
team
mean,
last
look, they
night.
took him out, and there's a long stretch
listen,
that he
have
did
balls
not
and do it.
play, and they played well without him last night. But when push comes to shove, you can't tell me and say the smartest thing to do is to keep Joel Embiid on the bench. You sound like an idiot.
Mike, I'm saying that when he gets when they get physical with him, there's nowhere to be found. And I'm saying until he learns to get physical, Mike, and act like and play like he's the best player in the league, he should take that game over. How can you disagree?
I don't
Best player in the
disagree,
game
but I'm
should
saying
dare
that
take
last
game over.
night I said I don't disagree, but he has physically dominated the entire playoffs. Last night, he was obviously physically not where he has been. That's what I'm saying. He has physically dominated every single team and every single player this whole season. No one's come close to him.
Mike, this is the NBA playoffs. You're playing the best of the best, Mike. You're not playing the scrubs every night.
All right, and he's averaging 35 points a game in the NBA playoffs.
And Michael, when we needed him last night, he did not come through. I'm not an idiot.
I'm
That's
agreeing with you on that, but I'm asking you, do you feel that he looked physically 100% last night?
Something was.
There's obviously something was wrong with him last
night.
night. He had no lift in his legs. He was coming up
listen.
short. He was coming up short on stuff that he has been making all playoffs long. You can obviously see he didn't have it in his legs last night.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but if it happens again and it's late in the game and they get physical with him, he's nowhere to be found, then I think it's an issue. That's how I feel, Mike.
That's fine. I'm not saying that. I said last night you were accurate last night. The rest of these playoffs, if you watched them at all, he has been the most physically dominating player throughout these playoffs, bar none. There's not a person out here who has been able to stop him.
All right, well, he got stopped last night. That's all I'm saying, Mike. Let's go forward. And hey, listen, I wouldn't. I don't. They're not there with Brett Brown. You disagree?
Not where they've been in the second round with Brett Brown. How many times? Been to the second round with Brett Brown.
Where they're at right now? No. Take Doc Rivers off the bench and put Brett Brown on the bench. Are they there where they're at now? I don't think so.
2-2 in a second round series. Yeah, absolutely. They went 7 games with the Raptors 2 years ago in the second round.
Like Joel Embiid started playing like he started taking games over. That's why last night I was a little disappointed. Doc Rivers had him playing. I think Doc Rivers is more like a father figure that Ben Simmons.
Well, this is like, and Tom, I get it. Like, you got to keep in mind when Brett Brown had these players, they were at the infancies of their careers. Joel Embiid missed 2 full seasons of basketball. Not to mention, he only played 1 college season of basketball. He had a guy who was raw as raw can get. And people wanted him to win a championship with that guy right off the bat. Then he has another guy who never played point guard before in his career. He comes right into the league. He misses a full year. And yet people are like, well, he wouldn't be here. The Sixers were in the second round twice with Brett Brown. They had the Raptors in the 7th game. So to say they wouldn't, you're telling me they would have lost to the Wizards because Brett Brown was coaching? That's the most ridiculous comment in the history of all your ridiculous comments. They wouldn't be in the second round of the playoffs with this roster because if someone other than Doc Rivers was coaching the team. Are you kidding me? My God. What are we, sniffing glue? Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Oh, my God. Jimmy Lynam, the coach. I wouldn't even ask him that question. I'd be embarrassed to bring it up. He's next. The Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. All right, here we go. In the 5 o'clock drive home from work, it is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Right now, the coach, Jimmy Lynam from NBC Sports Philadelphia. Sixers pre- and post-game live, which is, of course, still local, even throughout these national broadcasts. You can check them out an hour before the game and right after the game is over to break down all the action. And to break it down with us now is Jimmy Lynam, the of course, former head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, and he joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Coach, as obviously, if you're coaching that team last night and you're sitting on that plane and that's what happened, I would imagine that you are not too thrilled on your flight home.
No, you're correct by you, Mike. I'll quote Doc Rivers, they missed the golden opportunity, to secure what would have been probably a really secure 3-1 lead in this series by not being able to take advantage of an early 18-point lead.
If that's the case, and you said you lost a golden opportunity, what concerns you as a coach watching that tape today? If you look back at that thing and said, this happened, that happened, we might this one might be a fight. What stood out in that game last night as to why this series is now 2-2?
Well, that's easy, Mike. What stood out last night and what is the issue going forward are one and the same, and it's the condition of Joel Embiid. There was no doubt in my mind, I won't say right at the outset of the second half, but somewhere, during the latter part, 6 minutes to go, 7 minutes to go, it became very evident to me that he was compromised in some way. It may have said, as I said last night post game, it may have said Embiid on the jersey, but that was not Joel Embiid that you were watching shoot 0 for 12 in the second half. So that's the concern.
Now, Doc did say a little while ago that we wouldn't put Joel out there if he couldn't play. So obviously they don't think that he is so injured that he cannot play, but there was obvious that it was something with him. So do you think that Tobias Harris or Ben Simmons, that's the time for one of those two guys? If you're, looking at this and saying, all right, Joel's not right, I got to turn to one of my other guys. Or do you keep riding the guy who got you there?
No, the former. And let's make a distinction here. Joel Embiid had 21 rebounds in this game. The Atlanta Hawks shot 36% for the game, still were miraculously able to win. Joel Embiid is more than capable of rebounding and defending. What he's not capable of doing is being the real Joe at the offensive end of the court. So what you have to do is dial him back a little bit, not take him out of the game. No, he can be more than valuable, doing the two things that I say he does at a world-class level, rebound and defend. But unfortunately, he doesn't, for whatever reason. The injury is, at least last night in the second half, it was limiting his ability to gather, strength. When the nature of Joe's game, they're not as good as his footwork is. When he decides to come at you and challenge you, it's all power, and he was not able, what I call, to load up with his lower body because of the knee.
Right, and I guess if anybody knows anything about jump shooting, which he relied on a lot last night, a lot of his stuff in the second half was outside of the painted area. If your legs aren't there, that shot comes up short, and we saw a lot of that last night.
Yeah, even that, Mike, if you want to know the truth, on one, I'm not going to say on all, but on one, yes, he shot a jump shot, but you ready? His right leg barely thrust him off the ground.
Yep.
It wasn't a one-footer, both feet on the floor, but I saw it. My eye showed me. He literally went off of 1 foot to shoot that jumper, and it barely hit the front rim.
Yep, he certainly didn't look like himself shooting the ball last night. I want to just a couple of moments ago, Doc is speaking, and he was asked about Ben Simmons and the lack of aggression from him, and he said, I disagree. I don't need him to shoot more, but what I need him to do is do a better job of getting us into our offense. But I want to ask you, Coach, I said yesterday before the game, people thought that Green being out was not that big of a deal. And I said the floor spacing is going to be a problem because they have to attribute him in that corner. Whether he's hitting them or not, he still has to be accounted for. And I think that not having Green kind of made that offense look a little clunky last night.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I'm not going to, strongly disagree, but the absence of Danny Green was not the problem in the second half. The problem in the second half was Joel Embiid was not Joel Embiid.
Sure.
They're accustomed to getting a lot of points from him, 15 or more in a half, and they're accustomed to the other team having to react to that, start double teaming him, whereby the Seth Currys of the world start getting open looks. Curry got very few open looks last night. What he created, he really had to create on his own.
Yeah.
So that really was the issue. So going forward, Doc and his staff, they're going to, you put this up in relation to Ben, you're going to need Ben to do more. And I would beg to disagree with Doc in this sense. If you put up Ben's first half numbers versus Ben's second half numbers, the second half pales in comparison. You can't have that.
Yeah.
He had nowhere near as many rebounds, nowhere near as many assists, and he only took one shot. So I'm not. I understand what Doc is saying with the scoring of the points, and I'm with him there. But you have to have Ben Simmons involved if, in fact, you're not. Because the way this team has played all year long, like we've spoken about this, they put the ball in Joel Embiid's hands an inordinate amount of times. Of course they do, because the other team is then they're in a quandary. What do? We don't have anybody to guard him. And if we start double teaming him, we're letting other guys loose. Precisely. That's why the Sixers do it. Well, now maybe you don't have that option going forward.
Now,
so therefore,
Doc said,
come to the fore.
Doc said that he would agree that Ben needed to be more aggressive if that means pushing the pace and facilitating. But I almost thought the Hawks kind of took, one of the things I think people don't appreciate about Simmons because he doesn't score as much as you want is that he controls the pace and the tempo. The Sixers always seem, when they're doing well, they're playing at the pace and style that they want, and that frustrates other teams. I thought Young was brilliant last night at getting them out, and they controlled the pace and the style in the second half.
Yes, I would agree. And to be honest, I understand what Doc is saying, but Doc is not in full control of that. Like if I were playing the Sixers, one of my two main things, if the Sixers were at full strength, would be to control Ben Simmons in the open court. The Sixers have nothing to say about that. That's on me, and let's say in this case, the Atlanta Hawks. So give Atlanta credit. They did a good job in transition defense in putting the Sixers in a lot of half-court play. So to me, now that's let's say this is now page 2. Okay, so we don't get what we would like to get. Yeah, terrific. A lot of nights, in terms of open court play. So now you have to involve Ben. If Joe's going to be somewhat, as I'll use my word, compromised, involve Ben more in the half court, a la what you did in game number 2. I mean, Ben, come on. Ben was tremendous in game number 2 when they kind of went to him in that little sweet spot. And the second thing I want to tell you, I love when they pick and roll Ben Simmons. What do you want Ben to do when he's picking and rolling? Have the ball or set the pick? You ready? Flip the coin. I could care less. Put him in pick and roll. He's dynamite in either one of those roles. So sweet spot, post him, make him pick and roll, and Ben Simmons will not be invisible like he was the second half, but that's what he was.
Jimmy Lynam's with us, NBC Sports Philadelphia. Wednesday night, they'll have pre- and post-game live. Defensively, Trae Young was I likened him to an option quarterback at Navy. He knew when to pitch. He knew when to hold it and tuck it. He read the defensive end perfectly last night. Even though he didn't shoot it well, 18 assists, I thought he played brilliantly. But they pick and rolled the Sixers to death last night.
Well, obviously that's what Trae Young does. He's a terrific pick and roll player. But I would have to say, and I agree with your analysis. He was phenomenal. 18 assists for 2 turnovers. I mean, come on, that's unheard of. But I have to say, the Sixers overall, if I were the Sixers, I'm pretty satisfied with my defense. Atlanta shot 36%. Trae Young was 8 for 26.
Mm-hmm.
That's below 1/3, 33%. The fact of the matter is, Atlanta is going to win very few games with those offensive numbers. So the Sixer defense, they answered the bell. The problem was in the second half, the Sixer offense was so bad. They scored 62 points in the first half and 38 in the second. Come on.
Well, let me ask you this then, because I had said before they made 23s in game one. They need 23s. Well, they won a game last night where you just mentioned they didn't shoot all that well. I would imagine there's another game left in them where they're going to start connecting on a higher clip. Are you concerned as a coach that they got another night where the shots are going to start falling for them?
Well, yeah, sure, it's a concern, but the fact of the matter is, if you play adequate defense, what it means is they don't get as many open looks. That's on you. That's on the Sixers defense. If a team usually, and not that there can't be an outlier, but usually if a team is going to make in the vicinity, let's use your number, of 23s, then we're not doing what we have to do defensively.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually a part of the equation. Now, but I will give you that in this particular instance, meaning this 76er team versus this Atlanta Hawk team, you've got to double this little guy a lot. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to risk having him have a game like he had in the first half of game one, where he had 25 at the half with like 7 or 8 assists, and they got a 26-point lead. I mean, this kid is that good. He's capable of that. So the Sixers made a terrific adjustment. They're now trapping him a lot more. But if you're going to trap, you're going to give up some open threes. Yes, hopefully not to the level of making 20.
Do you stick with Korkmaz? I thought he was fine offensively, but I feel like if you're coaching, Jimmy Lynam's the coach, and Korkmaz is out there, aren't I scripting a couple plays right off the bat and going right at him? I mean, at least if he comes off the bench, that's in the flow of the game. But you stick him out there to start the game, it's like, all right, we're going to run some pick and roll right at that guy.
Yeah, I mean, the old adage, that's why he's a bench guy, meaning he doesn't play, the minutes that a starter does, for who knows what reason. I mean, it would, I think, be evident that he's not a high-level defender. But, yeah, other teams will try to take advantage of that without question. And, Korkmaz, if he's going to really be a starter, you'd hope that he can get himself going offensively. But I have to point out that if Joel Embiid is not Joe, he went 0 for 12 the second half. Well, you think Atlanta's thinking about was an assistant coach, nudging Nate McMillan, say, I think we better double this guy. Why? Why are you going to double? Of course you're not going to double him. The guy hasn't had a bucket in 10 minutes. So if you're not doubling Joel Embiid, the Korkmaz and Seth Currys of the world are not getting open threes as a result of the other team double teaming.
Yep, and then, of course, you look at what Korkmaz gave you on offense. He hits a couple of threes there. You start him. I guess they just figure it's better to have him that help space the floor with the starting unit than Matisse Thybulle. Is that the mindset there?
Yeah, and I'm comfortable either way. I would defer to the coaches with that. Whatever they think they need most at the top of the game. I think probably what you just said was in the forefront of their mind. And then you have a fresh Thybulle coming in to kind of harass Trae Young if you want to take Ben off of him. But let me just add on behalf of Korkmaz. Korkmaz made the biggest shot of this game for the 76ers. He made a late three that put the Sixers up 4. And if the Sixers had gotten a defensive rebound, they would have had a 4-point lead in the ball heading the other way. When Collins made his 3, that was off an offensive rebound, second shooting opportunity. So let's take our hat off to Korkmaz. That was a big-time 3 he knocked down late game.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it. Offensively, I mean, he hits a couple threes. He did what he asked you to do. You feel, Coach, the foul shooting of Simmons has entered his mind so much that in the second half of games, he does not want to get there?
That's a good one, Mike. I'm not a mind reader. I would not discount it as a possibility. And if, in fact, that is the case, even be it maybe subtle, then Ben has to overcome that. And the coaches have to help him overcome that. Go to the line. If you're not making them, really, it's like water off the duck's backside, dude. You got to be Ben Simmons out there. And, yes, we would like you to at least be able to make half your foul shots, and I would approach it just that way with him. I'd hit him straight on. We need you, dude, to be Ben Simmons and literally independent of your free throw percentage. I mean that. And I'd even tell them, Ben, I got news for you, dude. I'm not trying to play like a fairy tale here. Your foul shooting, might it cost us a game, some night, real late? It might, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the issue. That's not the issue. We need you to be Ben Simmons.
Yeah, I know that he was 1 for 5 last night. They lost the game by 3.
Yeah.
You add them up. And that's happened in this series. I just had somebody text in and said every single game they've lost, if he makes his free throws, they win those games. He was 3 for 10, 4 for 12, 1 for 5. And in all those games, that's pretty much, if he's 60 to 65%, they wouldn't have lost a game in these playoffs yet. You wonder how much that's creeping into his mind. And obviously last night with Joel not there. But that being said, Tobias Harris is the number 2 scorer. If you see Embiid's not there, is this the night where you say, Tobias, I know you got 20 and you were efficient, 8 of 15, good night. I need you to get me 28 to 30.
Yeah, sure. Except understand that over the long run, the reason Tobias had the season he had is in big part because he's third wheel behind Embiid and Simmons. Tobias doesn't play in a vacuum. So many of the opportunities that Tobias gets over the course of games is because Joe's doing his thing. And the defense has to start gang tackling Embiid. That's what the pieces of this team, the pieces fit very, very nicely. Like Curry, what a tremendous pickup. Yeah, especially because he's playing with Embiid and Simmons.
Right.
So I hear you, but it's not quite as simplistic as you stated.
No, and I think with the underlining, when we have this conversation, you break it all down. This team is truly the sum of the parts. You've got this special player in Joel, and you've got the 2 pieces that shoot with Green and Curry, and Simmons puts it all together, and Harris gets his room. But when those 5, when they're not working in concert together, it looks a little clunky. But when they're working together, it works very well.
No, you're right on, but I would only simply add, Mike, that's the case with most good teams in team sports.
Yeah.
That when they're at their best, they're functioning, as a unit. My phrase is I actually do it with my fingers and interlock my 2 hands. The pieces fit. That's what being good's about.
Yeah. I know Doc just recently said he didn't anticipate any more issues from Joel Embiid. They don't think this is going to linger or anything, so I'm assuming he's going to play. They're going to need every bit of him, as we saw, because Charles Barkley said the other night that he's irrelevant in this series. He scored 40 and they lost, or 39 and they lost. I can't imagine that they watched that game last night and see that Joel Embiid's irrelevant in this series.
No, that's a little out of bounds for me from my friend Sir Charles. He obviously loves to stir the pot. And each of these games are different. They're like fingerprints, I say, Mike. Every game has its own identity. And hopefully the Doc is on target, that Joe will be able to, be more Joe-like in terms of his physical well-being as we move forward.
All right, the coach, Jimmy Lynam, and the crew, tomorrow night, they will have you with Amy, Mark, and Coach Jimmy Lynam 1 hour before that game time tomorrow night on NBC Sports Philadelphia. And then as soon as it's over, you can flip back over and get all the post-game reaction from the local crew. And we always appreciate having you, Coach, here on the Sports Bash. Thank you so much.
My pleasure as always, Mike. Thank you.
All right. We'll have Coach back again hopefully next week here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And, of course, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. As he mentioned there, Joel Embiid being back is a key. But I want to read an exchange. This is from Kyle Neubeck, who covers the Sixers for Philly Voice, and he put out the transcript. Doc Rivers was asked by a reporter. Ben admitted after the game he needed to be a little bit more aggressive. Wanted to get your thoughts on that and how you kind of get him going. Doc Rivers' answer. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for this? I'll read it to you coming up. Stick around. It's an interesting answer from one Doc Rivers. When we come back, it's a Tuesday with Thompson. The PT's here. And we got a special guest joining Tuesday with Thompson. Stick around for that. How about that? Special guest and that Doc Rivers answer. That's all coming up on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. All right, 526 on your Tuesday. It's the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. I read off the question that Doc Rivers was asked today, which was, Ben admitted after the game he needed to be a little bit more aggressive. Wanted to get your thoughts on that and how you kind of get him going. Doc Rivers, I couldn't disagree with that more. I actually think more aggressive if he's talking about facilitating, yeah. Getting the ball up the floor with better pace, but not as far as shooting or anything like that. Just getting us into our stuff more aggressively with better pace. And that may end up him shooting the ball because of that. But we were just walking the ball up the floor, taking our time, so maybe that's what he means. And then he's right about that for sure. But that's not how we play basketball. All right, it's a Tuesday with Thompson. The PT's here, and we got a little special guest who's going to be joining the show. And, of course, you remember him as one of the co-hosts of the Sports Bash on 3 ESPN. And he is now a part of his own media conglomerate, Broads Media. You can check him out at his Twitter handle and see his coffee with Broads and his sports talk with Broads and all that stuff. But we got the old gang back together there. There's the PT and there's Broads here on the Sports Bash live on the video stream. What's up, boys?
What a treat. Wow.
PT, you had no idea?
No, I'm teaching all day. I'm trying to get kids graduated and get them out. I had no clue. Zero.
Because PT's usually at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. Well, the coach, Jimmy Lynham, said he can only do 5 o'clock. So I had to bump the PT to 5:25. And that was the time that you said that you could do. So I said, let's just have a little old reunion here.
Yeah, I love it. I'm excited. We got a lot to talk about last night. You know me. I'm a little fired up right now with this whole Ben Simmons drama.
Yeah, it's funny. Back there was a while there where we said, hey, let's see if it happens in the playoffs. Well, for the most part, it has happened in the playoffs. They haven't needed him to score all that much. The game that they lost, he scored 17. The game that they won, he scored 4.
Yeah, well, it's not about the score. No, this is a joke. The fact that you have Shake Milton, a bench player, being your primary point guard while your $30 million man that you paid is on the bench watching, this is year 5. It's unacceptable that we're still having this conversation today. And I'm a huge Ben Simmons lover. I love him. But this is killing me inside, Gil. We cannot continue to do this.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. At the end of the game, where was Ben Simmons? He was on the bench, right? I mean, he wasn't there because, he wasn't going to shoot, right? You needed somebody to shoot at that point. Who's going to shoot the basketball? And it certainly isn't going to be Ben Simmons. And, two things bug me. One, Gil, I'd heard some of the narratives where Simmons said he had to be more aggressive. I'd heard where, Embiid admitted, he couldn't jump or he couldn't lift, he couldn't get the vertical that he used to be able to get, but or when he's healthy. But I hadn't heard, again, Doc Rivers is pulling this I disagree crap. Doc, just because we were born in the day doesn't mean we were born yesterday. We're not morons. We can see what's going on.
Well, I mean, he threw it around. He said Ben admitted he needed to be more aggressive. And then he said, well, I couldn't disagree with that more. So he's trying to say Ben doesn't – I think he took it as Ben's being aggressive, meaning he has to shoot more. And Doc's saying, I don't care if he shoots more, but he does need to push the pace and get other people's shots. And I said in the beginning, see, where people, I think, miss out on Simmons sometimes is he controls the tempo of the game. When he feels like running, he runs. When he wants to slow it down, he slows it down. When he wants to go into the post, they get him in the post, and he finds other guys, and they hit the open shots. Well, I thought last night Trae Young stole that from him. I thought Young was brilliant last night.
Right. He was the facilitator. He was the guy that was dictating the pace. He was the guy that was pushing the basketball. And look, at the end of the day, I'm not asking Ben to necessarily shoot the basketball, but still be Ben, and that's the thing. I mean, okay, so he was 0 for 0 in his 8 fourth quarter minutes from the floor. Fine. I'd be okay with that if he still was being Ben and pushing the pace.
Right.
And that didn't happen. And that's what
Doc
bugs
Rivers
me
was saying,
more than anything else.
I think that's what Doc Rivers was saying, was that he got away from that aspect where he wasn't. Because I don't know, guys, I'll tell you this. I think the foul shots are really starting to creep in his mind, and he doesn't want any part of getting there.
No doubt. And look, I like Doc Rivers. He's a very, very, very smart basketball mind, but I just don't like his approach. It's almost like he looks at us as not intelligent sports fans. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. You want me to take Ben Simmons off the floor? And then he did it the next game because they were intentionally fouling him. So, yes, we are right to question that. And I don't like this approach that it's like them against you, Ben. He's setting it up where it's Ben versus the fans versus the media. And I just don't understand the approach. It doesn't really have to be that way.
I mean, do you remember another coach, Broads, that used to talk down to the media all the time and said they were morons and he was a genius in coaching and he was on the football side of things and then he didn't plan a holiday party, right, and got fired.
Nature of the beast, because guess what? I hear the same tone out of Joe Girardi sometimes too.
Yeah, maybe that's what we've become. Gil, are the coaches in Philly just pissed off at all the media now and they're just tired of it?
It's funny because I don't want to make this like a whole like Girardi, but we hated Kapler. People hated Kapler because he would protect the players.
I hated Kapler because he would never speak the truth ever. Everything was positive. The guy went 0 for 4, and it was the best damn 0 for 4 you ever saw. I mean, come on. Mr. Coconut Oil, give me a break.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I know that like Doc Rivers sometimes overly protects his guys. That's obvious. I mean,
But he doesn't here's the thing, Gil. He does not overprotect all the guys. It's just Ben. He'll say he needs more from Tobias. He'll talk about Joel in a different way. It's just
right. He'll rip,
Ben.
what was it, Maxey for his defense? You know, he'll rip different guys and say, like, he was the worst defender. You're absolutely, that's a great point, bros. The only guy he's coddling, the only guy that he's putting the blinders on. Oh, would you like a little bit for your pillow? Do you want a little cookie, before you go to bed?
Ben Simmons in the game 3, third quarter, he changed the game. It was a 5-point game. They set it up where he was now in the post and he was kind of, that lob, the alley-oop. It was all there and it was awesome. But he has the ability to change the game. And we know that. There's mismatches every single game all the time. So when he doesn't take advantage of those, it crushes me inside because he can do it every game. Not all 48 minutes, but when we need him to. He's not doing it in those limited times when we need him to.
All right, Rodney says Doc's going about it the right way. He can't call out Simmons to the media like Brett Brown and then no free agents would sign here. That's funny because some people said, Brett Brown, he couldn't get it out of him. He wasn't tough enough on him. And now it's the opposite side. It's like, this is why I say too many people just like they blame the coach because
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people,
the coach ultimately, there's too much. The coach gets too much credit when they win, and not enough, or too much. Really, I see what you're trying to say, Gil, which is that the coach is only one factor. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it ain't Doc Rivers out there on the free throw line. It ain't Doc Rivers putting up the shots.
Right? Did Doc Rivers go 0 for 12 last night? No, Joel Embiid did. And, I just had Jimmy Lynam on it. He said, watching Embiid, you could tell he was taking shots and he was barely raising his feet off the ground. He was just shooting flat-footed. And if you watch where those shots were coming up short, he's hitting front rim like a lot of those shots. He just obviously did not have it last night. I mean, if he makes one of the 12 shots in the second half, it's a different game. And he just –
And I heard your opening, Gil, and with Danny Green, I think you're spot on with the whole Danny Green thing. It's, with Danny Green, you almost have a combination of Korkmaz and Matisse Thybulle. And now you got to find your way to maneuver both of those on the floor, but you have a gaping hole on one side, no matter which guy you play out there. And I thought Korkmaz, whether he was trying to dive for a loose ball at half court or just losing his matchups defensively, he was bad on that. And Matisse was getting scared to shoot.
Where were you, Broads? Like, I had my buddies texting me, you need to get Green out of here, get him off the court. Stop. I said, dude, whether he makes the three or not, his spacing on the floor, the other team has to account for him because he shoots 40%. So if that 40% comes in the first 3 games or the last 3 games, it's going to equal out to 40% most likely. He was not shooting well. But to take him off the floor, that floor spacing was not the same last night. And Simmons alluded to that at one point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's exactly what it was. And when you think of Danny Green, it's like there were actually some Sixers fans out there that thought that it was a blessing in disguise to get him off the floor because look, he wasn't playing well defensively. But I think the calf injury might be a correlation on why he wasn't playing well. Maybe it got so far that he couldn't go out there and compete anymore. But maybe there's a correlation because he's not as bad of a defender as he showed in those first 2 games.
Well, he's also defending freaking Trae Young, who's pretty darn
Oh, yeah.
good.
Game 1 was a disaster of a move by Doc, but the other games, I didn't think he had more left. Even game 1, as bad as it was, I still think Danny Green had more to show than he did, even in that specific matchup that he'd get hosed in.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Tony says, does any team cater to one player the way the Sixers do Simmons?
Oh,
Don't all teams cater to a player in one way or another? You know, sometimes it's catering to cater to a player who's your star guy, and you're going to him at crunch time instead of maybe somebody else, you know. But I think all teams cater to one or two players. If cater means coddle, I think a lot of NBA teams coddle too. I'm going to say yes. I think other teams do that. I don't.
Like the way the Rockets would cater to Harden, like they just like catered to him and said, dribble, score as many points as you want. I mean, to some extent, the Sixers catered to Allen Iverson.
The Mavericks are about to do it with Luka Doncic after the news that came out the last couple of days. So I agree with you. I don't want to put Ben Simmons in the same category as what I'm about to say, but this is just the way that I look at what happened with the Phoenix Suns and Chris Paul in the fourth quarter and like the floor general role. And I know Chris Paul is one of the best point guards to ever do it, but I look at your floor general and how important that is in fourth quarter moments. And then I look at Ben Simmons, and that's where I have the issue. I know he's so talented, but when I see what Chris Paul can do, how he can calm the presence down and do the little things right, and then I watch Ben and he can't even be on the floor in the last possession, I just don't know what to do with that information.
Yeah, by nature, Broads, your point guard is the guy that should be the calm, leading presence who's on the floor in the biggest moments, coming up with maybe not necessarily a basket, but the biggest decision-making to help you win the basketball game. And when you can't have your point guard, 6'11" or not, when you can't have your point guard on the floor in the most crucial moments of the game, then you're not getting the full player. You're getting half a player or 70% of a player. 70% of Embiid is going to win you some games. 70% or less of Ben Simmons ain't going to win you bleep, boop.
Now, somebody texted in, and he says Embiid was hungover. Embiid doesn't drink. That's
right.
Well documented.
Well, I was thinking there was some, chicken wings.
I mean, yeah, right. If it was a strawberry Chick-fil-A shake or something, then they're going back 6 or 8 years. But
did he fall off the wagon on his diet? And if he had a sugar rush and he just crashed?
I mean, come on.
He doesn't eat, like if you do the keto or whatever, and you don't eat sugar, and then all of a sudden you have that sugar day, you feel like utter poop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it's just funny, the people that are saying, like, you know, I heard you talking to one excellent caller of the show saying, like, Embiid's got to sit. What? You can't pull Embiid off the floor unless the guy's got his leg dangling and a compound fracture. You got to put him out there.
All right. And I said to Jimmy Line, I'm like, if your guy doesn't have it, your star of stars, he's the number 2 player in the league MVP voting and probably should have won the damn award. That being said, he's 1, 2, or 3 in the entire league. On a night he doesn't have it, even if that's the case, you still have to go to him in that moment, right?
Yeah,
there's
100%.
fans that are upset with the look that Embiid got late because they went to Embiid. He was a half an inch away from the basket. You tell me I get $1 billion if Embiid makes that shot. I'm taking it every time. And unfortunately, I would have lost last night, but I'm taking that. That was a good draw-up play.
It was.
I mean, they diagrammed the play, and that's the thing. Doc diagrammed that play up to get Embiid loose. They got him. You just didn't have an Embiid that could dunk and throw it down like the other dunk we saw in the other game, which, by the way, was amazing.
Because normally, right, you draw that play up thinking he's going to stuff it down. Because normally he goes down the middle like a freight train. Everybody gets the heck out of the way, and he throws it down right in your face. He did not have that elevation. Now, I was surprised. Embiid misses the layup. I'm surprised more people weren't blaming Simmons for not getting the putback.
There is an element to that. Not gonna lie. You know, I've cracked on Ben, and I'm not saying that he stinks by any means. I know what type of talent he is, but it irks me that all right, let's go back to game 3, right?
What do you mean you cracked on him?
I can't stand him. Like, he's a fraud.
Oh, whoa.
He's like for the first half of game 3, he does nothing but run up the floor, pass the ball off, and then go stand underneath the basket and do nothing. Then, in the third quarter, he goes off, explodes, and then the game is out of reach. Do you not see? It's not ironic here, Ben. You're so good. You just don't know how to attack mismatches. You are so good. Can John Collins stop him? No. Can Bogdanovich stop him? No. Can anyone on that team stop him? It doesn't have to be every possession because Embiid needs to get his and other guys need to get his. But there's no reason to come up the floor, hand the ball off to Seth Curry, and then go stand and do nothing for 30 minutes. It's embarrassing.
It's so
Get
true.
paid $30 million.
It's so true, bro. I mean, this is like there's two people on the Sixers' entire roster that can influence the scoreboard on both ends of the floor. One of them was injured last night, and one of them ran from the spotlight. One of them actually got benched and wasn't on the floor in the most crucial moment. I mean, it's bizarre why this guy defers from shining.
Well, there's two different types of people that can't stand
benched per se. I mean, obviously
they sat him when they needed a bucket, and it wasn't going to come from a guy that doesn't shoot buckets.
Obviously, you got a guy who doesn't shoot. You're putting your best 3-point shooters out there. He would not qualify, obviously.
Yeah, but he's your primary point guard that makes max money contract. I mean, that's where it's different. Like if Ben Simmons is not making that much money and he's not a max player guy, then I think maybe the conversation's a little bit different about it.
The entire package is they won 10 games to get him. Okay, so you had to suffer through the 10-game season, and that's who you ended up with because of that.
And I'll take him over Ingram still.
But coupled with the fact that he's the number one pick in the draft. So you're thinking we suffered through a 10-win season to get the number one pick, and now we have a number one pick who has warts. Well, go back and look at number one picks. Unless it's LeBron James, you're not getting a perfect player.
Yeah, that's fine. But this is a lot different than just a perfect player. This is like something we've never seen before. This is outrageous.
He's a triple-double threat. If you're talking Simmons, he's a triple-double threat every night. He's one of the better perimeter defenders in the league. He's just this. It's like a bad movie. The Reluctant Shooter, starring Ben Simmons. The Reluctant Star, starring Ben Simmons.
The interesting part about this is if you sat and had a conversation with a basketball coach, they'd say almost universally, I'll take Ben Simmons. You talk to fans, I want Ben Simmons out.
Yeah,
I don't want him out. I just like him not to shy away from the spotlight for all the money that they're paying him, and I'd like him to come up a little bit bigger.
Yeah, and I'm willing to allow someone to grow.
Here's the funny thing, Pete. When Andre Iguodala was here, people couldn't stand him because of the money that he made.
Right.
Well, the second he went to someplace else and actually turned out to be a pretty good player, people were like, we had that guy. Well, you hated him because of the money that he made. He was getting paid too much money for the role that he had on that team. And that's almost what Ben Simmons is now. He's getting paid way too much money for the role that he has on the team, but his role is still integral.
Yeah, but I think this is the difference. I think that there are some that are so out of touch that think he absolutely stinks. He doesn't stink. I think my bottled frustration is because when you think of Andre Iguodala, his ceiling was never even close to this ceiling. So when we do see this Ben Simmons ceiling, it's taking over the league type of dominance. And it's like we know
he has that ability.
Have that. And that's like we never thought that in Iguodala. He was just overpaid and he was a nice player. Ben is you could be one of the best to play the game. And maybe that's a little extreme, but
and
you're
still only how old? 24, right? He's 24
yeah.
years old.
So I think it's the level that they can max out at each is what boils this frustration more for the Ben Simmons crowd.
This is going to be interesting. Like if I said to you, because you're saying how dominant, and I agree. Like I think Ben Simmons, if he wanted to, could probably score 25 to 30 points a night if he really wanted to, right?
By actually recognizing mismatches or being more aggressive.
And that's the frustrating part. Yes, it's like if he wanted to, he could. It's almost like he prefers not to, and he'd rather others do it. Why? I don't know. But at the same time, he could score 25 to 30 and still by not shooting. It's the most bizarre, frustrating thing. But again, like it's like if you allow yourself to get frustrated by the fact that he won't shoot, you're gonna have that opinion. Like so, it's
not about the shooting though, because I don't think I look at Ben where I need him to have 20 to get me satisfied. I think honestly, the most perfect Ben type of night is something around like 16 points, 12 assists, and 8 rebounds.
Well,
like
let me
I
ask you,
think that's the Ben I need.
On the flip side, guys, You got a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo who can't shoot a lick. He's firing up 8 threes and he's 1 for 8. Would you rather that?
No, I don't think I would.
No, I don't think I'd have that either. You know,
You got to find the balance.
right.
Right.
And it's right.
He's 1 of 8 for 3 one night. He's 1 for 5 from 3 the next night, but he scored 32 points in that game. But you see what they're doing. They're just putting the wall up. We're not seeing the wall as much this year for Ben because they have the shooters and he's kicking it out. And there you got Curry hitting threes. You got Green hitting threes. And we haven't seen that wall defense. You're seeing it against Antetokounmpo. I mean, Antetokounmpo is like literally trying to put his head down and run through that wall. And he just has like his limitations in the end. I said the other day, the difference is the Bucks need Antetokounmpo to score. The Sixers do not need Simmons to score.
They do need him to play defense against Trae Young, though, at least in this series. You know, I mean, once they made that move, Trae Young has not been nearly as successful. So, I mean, as we sit here and spend our segment, it's the trash Ben Simmons segment. He also had no turnovers for just the third time in 31 playoff games. I did notice that, you know, I mean, so from one aspect, he had a few things that were nice, but it's that overall feeling like Rhodes is talking about that when it comes to crunch time, when it comes to money time, where's your leadership coming from? And certainly it wasn't coming. Embiid was not healthy enough to be the hero we wanted him to be. And Ben Simmons was not willing enough to be the hero that we wanted him to be.
I definitely don't think it's time to have this conversation, but hypothetically, Gil, if the offseason comes around and let's say the Sixers fall short somewhere along the lines, and Damian Lillard, Daryl Morey picks up the phone and goes, Damian Lillard, you know, maybe we could do something here. Would you be willing to move on from Ben Simmons for a Damian Lillard with Joel Embiid combo?
I would think, Broads, if they lose this series, they have to consider shaking something up. Because if you can't get out of the second round again with these two guys, I think you have to consider just doing something different, having a different.
Does your thoughts change if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and lose?
I mean, do they lose with a full Nets team? Do they lose? You know what I mean? Like, I don't
there's a lot involved.
There's a lot involved. Here's the problem. You lose Ben Simmons on what he does on defense, and you might add a guy who could score a lot, but you're going to suffer big time on that other end. And, I mean, it's like 220, 221, you know?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think, look, I'm not – I would be okay if they keep him. I would be okay if they move on for a player of that caliber, not just some stiff in a bag of basketballs. But it's interesting. I don't know. You know, number 5, Donovan McNabb, he was very – controversial. Is this it? Is this the most controversial player we'll ever see in this city?
Well, certainly not in his comments.
He is definitely one of the most polarizing situations that I've ever dealt with, and he's only 24 years old. I mean, so keep in mind, he's got a long way to go.
And he hasn't had any moments like where he didn't know the game couldn't end in a tie or anything like that, right? I mean, he hasn't had any. Has he really had any Ben Moron moments?
Well, no, but so keep this in mind. We talked about this the other day. LeBron, Jordan, Durant, all those guys, they didn't win titles to their 8th, 9th years in the league. Joel Embiid missed 2 years, but this is his 7th NBA season. He played 5. He missed 2. He was drafted in 2013. Ben has only played in 4, so he missed 1. So he's still a couple of years away from getting to where those players really hit their peak and primes. I think Joel is there now. I think he's ready. The question is his running mate ready to get there with them?
Yeah. Batman's there and Robin is still in training. Can anybody tell me where Tobias Harris disappeared to last night, by the way? What happened to him? He looked great in the first half, and then, I mean, come on. Anyhow, I
5
digress.
of 18. He was 5 of 13. He had a high efficiency night, but I thought when Embiid looked like he didn't have it, that's when he had to say, I'm the number 2 scorer. Go through me. All right, guys, we got to run.
All right, it was fun. Hey, bro, it's great to see you, buddy. This was fun.
Absolutely. We'll do it again sometime soon.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
There's Broads. Check him out at Broads81. Broads Media. His Coffee with Broads. What time is that? 9?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. Sports Talk with Broads after all the games. And, of course, a Tuesday with Thompson, like all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. See you guys.
See ya.
See you again.
All right, we're back to close it out next. All right, that'll do it for me tonight. Coming up on game night, Brian Toporek talks a little Sixers and Hawks with Josh. And then, of course, we've got you for game number 5. Nets and Bucks right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks to everybody who chimed in today. We had a busy day on the video stream and on the text board. And don't forget, download the free mobile app. Do it right now. Do it. It's powered by First Bank of Seattle. You can take the show on the go on your phone with the free 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to my guests today, Frank Close, Jeff Nadu, Michael Caskey, Blow Maine, Football at 4, the head coach, Jimmy Lynam, and those two right there, Pete Thompson and Broads from Broads Media. Coming up tomorrow, Mike McGarry, Paul Hudrick, and you. Always you. Have a great night. Coming up on Wednesday, Sixers, Hawks, Game 5 in Philly. Can the Sixers regain control of the series? A preview with Paul Hudrick at 3:20. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Jason Fisk gives us a national perspective. And Jeff Mosher and Jeff Kerr talking a little NFL.